Chapter 228. Wulin Chinese Network. Gu Nan knew about this a long time ago. Back in the day, Sky's secret path master set up no return and forced her to reincarnate. That was how she got the opportunity to break the world. He thought after doing such a thing, hiding in Shanghai Pavilion would be safe. He did not expect to be chased by no return to Shanghai Pavilion. In the end, he died. He originally thought that after doing such a thing that harmed others to benefit himself, hiding in the Star Sea Pavilion would be foolproof. However, he didn't expect that he would be chased to the Star Sea Pavilion by the young girl No Return. In the end, he still ended up dead. This was a big deal. Shanghai Pavilion lost a lot of face. After that, they started to monitor the entire astral world. Because of this, Shanghai Pavilion, which had been relaxed for a few hundred years, suddenly became tense. That was why they reacted so quickly when Gu Nan made a move. When young girl No Gui opened her mouth, a series of reasons flashed through Gu Nan's mind. It was like doing quests. It was best to know the background story of an NPC. Gu Nan always paid attention to that. Have you gotten your revenge against Sky Secret? Gu Nan asked after thinking. Why are you still looking for trouble with Shanghai Pavilion? Do you have other ideas? Gu Nan wondered what her goal was, but No Return just shook her head. She did not want to talk about it. You just need to answer me. Are you interested in participating? Haha, no. Gu Nan coldly laughed and casually replied. He knew No Return thought he had a grudge against Shanghai Pavilion. Maybe they had the same goal. In reality, No Return was thinking too much. He had never heard of players looking for an NPC for revenge. That was because all players understood that if they kept playing, they would be stronger than everyone else. With that kind of confidence, even if they were easily killed by a boss, the players could go back and level up. They could buy equipment and come back to fight again. Killing monsters to level up was a matter of course. On the other hand, there was nothing to be angry about being attacked by monsters. If you had aggro, of course you would be attacked. In the face of Gu Nan's refusal, the young girl, No Return, seemed to be mentally prepared. A rare smile appeared on her face as she looked at Gu Nan without saying anything. There seemed to be some deep meaning in her gaze, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she quickly turned around and left, leaving Gu Nan unable to guess what it was. In the Star Realm, Gu Nan was still affected by Yu Jiu's curse. His recovery ability was suppressed, so it was not convenient for him to go to the Shanghai Pavilion to wreak havoc. Right now, there were only two things that Gu Nan needed to do. One was naturally to wait 5 years for Shadow Song to open the star path again and take him to the inner world. On the other hand, Gu Nan felt that it was indeed necessary for him to settle down and do some experiments and research. Immortal Demon World. In the blink of an eye, it had been more than a year since Gu Nan left the hero world and returned to the surface world. As for the 1 year in the astral realm, because time flowed 10 times faster in the immortal demon world, a full 12 years had passed. The various systems that Gu Nan had been implemented very well. The immortal demon world was getting closer and closer to the god kingdom that he had envisioned. The Shanghai Pavilion had inspected the world and ordered all the transcendents to register. When everyone thought that it was destined to fail, it was actually carried out. This time, the Shanghai Pavilion's determination seemed to be especially firm. Whether it was bribery, concealment, or manipulation, they were all suppressed with lightning speed. Suddenly, the 9 major star fields were dyed red. In a short period of more than a year, the star realm had completely become a licensed practice. Transcendents who could not produce their documents would be interrogated as unregistered residents. Even the world breakers that the Shanghai Pavilion had sent to the major star fields did not seem to have any intention of returning. Aside from the central star field, the Shanghai Pavilion had sent more than 2 world breakers to the other 8 star fields. Some star fields even had roaming movements to ensure that there were always people guarding. If the inspection farce had made people think that the Shanghai Pavilion was going crazy, then the series of actions that followed were enough to make people realize what was going on. Is there going to be a war? Gu Nan looked through the information from the Star Realm. He understood what the Shanghai Pavilion was doing and what it meant. Probably. Since my little brother is back, he will not stop. Shadow Song sat across from Gu Nan and sipped a cup of coffee. This place is getting harder and harder to find. She was now in the immortal demon world. It was not easy to get a cup of coffee. It was even harder to locate the coordinates of the immortal demon world. That means my efforts over the years have paid off, Gu Nan said with a smile. Ever since he came back, Gu Nan had been looking for a way to move the immortal demon world. He wanted to mess up the coordinates of the place. After all, this was where his god kingdom was. Gu Nan did not want too many people to visit the place before he reached level 5. It would be a mess. Over the years, Gu Nan spent most of his time in the immortal demon world. He did not even go to the Star Realm. Planet Xian Yellow was in the hands of Shanghai Pavilion, but he did not care. The immortal demon world and Lan Si were there. Gu Nan did not care much about them. After all, as long as he had enough time, he could completely rebuild White Mist Set. There was no need for him to keep the original people. The only people he still had contact with were Shadow Song, Young Lady No Return, and the others. Wu Gui didn't have much to say to him. On the other hand, Shadow Song often came to his side with the appearance of an ordinary little girl. Although her power had not recovered much, she could travel between planes. She was like a world breaker. It seemed like this was determined by the nature of life. What business do you have this time? Nothing. Shadow Song picked up a fruit and put it in her mouth. Purple lightning is out again. I am afraid I will be killed, so I came here to hide. Obviously, Shadow Song's main body wasn't normal either. Everything she ate, she swallowed it whole. She did not chew. Right, every time I come, I see you. Have you been staying here all the time? Haven't you ever gone out? Gu Nan nodded without hesitation. For a player like him, who was half a nerd, staying at home was normal. Shadow Song looked like she had discovered a new continent. She looked at him with surprise. You are in the world breaker phase, right? Do you not need to collect the world's origin to improve your rules? For normal world breakers, they had the same nature of life as the Star Master. The way to progress was to collect the world's origin. Of course, the Star Master stole the origin to build or improve their star realm. World breakers mainly observe. They did not put it into their bodies. Seeing Gu Nan remain silent, Shadow Song looked even more shocked. That cannot be true. You have been able to break the world. Did no one teach you anything? Gu Nan was speechless. The people who taught me, aside from a few enemies, were all killed by me. If you wanted to read some light novels, go to the Apex Novel Network. Chapter 229. Wulin Chinese Network. Shadow Song didn't stay for long before leaving the immortal demon world. Clearly, Violet Lightning didn't spend too much time on this. But before she left, she gave Gu Nan a set of coordinates. The largest neutral trading plane in the heavenly world? Purple Civ Heaven? Gu Nan sat down with a mark on it, but he felt a little playful in his mind. This was the second time he heard the name Purple Civ Heaven. The first time was when Duanmu Yin said that the injured Purple Will hid in Purple Civ Heaven. On the other hand, Shadow Song's unintentional words made Gu Nan feel enlightened. He felt that his path was getting narrower and narrower. Many times, he seemed to have lost his goal. Now, he relied on the heavenly star path to prolong his life, which was the source of sin points. In the past, he always felt that the problem was with the evil god's temple, and that it couldn't provide him with more help. But now that he thought about it carefully, it seemed that he had also made a mistake. The evil god's temple was just a dead object. It couldn't always guide Gu Nan forward. In fact, as Gu Nan's realm increased, it gradually reduced the source of sin points. In fact, it had a very obvious direction. All of this was to tell Gunan one thing. After reaching the 4th level, the source of the world was sin points and point. At this stage, Gunan's path of advancement seemed to be the same as this world. In the end, he was pursuing the same thing. This point corresponded with Gunan's original judgment. The power system of the game was essentially the same as this world, so the resources needed by cultivators were naturally the same. Such a simple thing, and you've only discovered it now? Blind student, the flourishing point you've discovered is the ladder of human progress. Gunan spat out some unintelligible words, but his thoughts became clearer and clearer. These years of research had given him a new understanding of the nature of the world. The surface world was the real world. Heaven and realm only had different names, but in essence they were planes with complete rules. As for the world-level planes, they all had various flaws. The inner world was the hub that controlled the planes. It contained the most fundamental laws of each major plane, and these laws constructed the corresponding planes. Looking back, he was summoned by the evil god's temple when he was at the 1st rank. After the 2nd rank, he had to rely on himself to reincarnate. At the 4th rank, he didn't even have the chance to reincarnate. Perhaps the real turning point was not coming to the outside world, but his own advancement. Gunan's consciousness once again arrived at the evil god's temple. This familiar temple was the same as before, but in Gunan's eyes, it was somewhat unfamiliar. This place shouldn't be called the Evil God Hall, but the Evil God Nurturing Center. The goal was to nurture a true evil god. Teacher, the first martial arts competition between the two alliances has come to an end. These are the rankings. Yan Xiaoxiao's voice brought Gunan back to reality. A list of names had been handed to him, but Gunan had no interest in reading it. His mind was still immersed in his thoughts, but the real feeling of the immortal demon world made his mouth slightly reveal a smile. As long as the rules of the game still applied there, that was enough. He spent a lot of effort to study this world, but he did not want to abandon the rules of the game. Only by understanding reality could he better understand the rules of the game. Then, with the rules he was familiar with, he could beat one enemy after another. Gunan lowered his head and looked at the list. He put it aside. The God Kingdom was still in the foundational stage. There were too many things that were not perfect yet. His goal was not to find a champion. It was, like I said before, the warriors with good rankings will be given a certain number of spouses based on their gender. That will allow their blood and genes to be passed on. Yan Xiaoxiao nodded without any expression. She had gotten used to Gunan's attitude. Selecting the most outstanding individuals in a group and then finding a way to breed them was a true pig-rearing method. Gunan thought about the coordinates and said, "I will be going out soon. Is there anything else?" "Nothing much. By the way, Lan Si is in seclusion to break the world," Yan Xiaoxiao said after a moment of thought. Gunan nodded and did not say anything. Lan Si leveling up was a good thing, and it was something he expected. Her talent was not bad. In the past, her personality had held her back. With the help of a god's personality, it was normal for her to have a breakthrough after spending 10 years in the fairy demon world. On the other side of the endless space, a white-clothed, black-haired shadow slowly appeared. He entered a weird world. There was no space there, and there was no concept of a planet. The whole plane was one. The ground seemed to have a border. This was Purple Civ Sky, a famous neutral plane. "Welcome to Purple Civ Sky, Mr." Gunan had just arrived when someone came to greet him. It was a woman wearing a white dress. She looked very polite. Gunan had torn space to come here. He did not ride a starship. That was enough to prove his identity. He was a world breaker. Even in a super big plane like Purple Civ Sky, world breakers were not cabbages that could be found on the side of the road. They were the reserve of a Star Lord. Normal people had to look up to them. The woman stood in front of Gunan. She lowered her head. She was very excited. Many world breakers came to Purple Civ Sky, but Purple Civ Sky was very big. Not many of them would be able to meet her. The woman did not dare do anything bad to a world breaker. She was a guide who wandered the plains border. She relied on being a guide for the big shots to make a living. If he was able to make friends with a break world elite, there would be a lot of benefits. If there was hope, she did not mind giving up her body in exchange for resources for practice. In a neutral plane like purple sieve sky, the strong ate the weak. The law of the jungle was very clear. "Mister, do you need?" "There is no need." A voice sounded behind Gu Nan. It interrupted the woman. The voice made the woman's face freeze. She turned around to look behind Gu Nan. A little girl, who was only about the waist of a normal person, walked out. She did not have the presence of a cultivator, but her face was cold. She had a red cloak on her back, which made her feel strangely oppressive. "Yes, sorry to bother you." The woman did not dare say anything. She lowered her body and left. Fox. Shadow Song, who looked like a little girl, grunted in the direction of the woman's retreat. Gu Nan turned around to look at Shadow Song, who was behind him. "Why are you here too? Someone might be watching us. It is safer to follow you." Shadow Song did not hide anything. "You promised to protect me." "Ha ha." Gu Nan gave her a friendly smile. A player's promise to an NPC was like a fart. If it was necessary, they could go back on their word. So, Gu Nan did not want to argue with her about whether or not he had actually promised her. In comparison, he was more concerned about something else. His eyes lit up with the fire of gossip. "You came here to follow me. Won't Purple Lightning be jealous? You guys must have had a fight, right?" "Hey, hey, hey!" Shadow Song looked at him angrily. "What kind of relationship do you think we have? I have always treated you like a father." Gu Nan looked as if he had just realized something. He sighed and said, "Oh, it is Ghost Father. If you wanted to read some light novels, go to Apex Novel Network." Chapter 230. Wulin Chinese Network. Travel through the sky to be an evil god. Latest chapter. As for the true relationship between Shadow Song and Violet Lightning, Gu Nan didn't get to the bottom of it. Of course, whether Shadow Song was angry or ashamed, Gu Nan did not believe a single word of it. Star Master's attitude toward others could only be judged by their actions. It could not be judged by their words. Purple Sieve Sky was a really big plane, but it was not very big. It was much smaller than a plane like Galaxy World. That was because Purple Sieve Sky's space was special. It was different from the star worlds that Gu Nan had seen before. There were no planets or stars there. Above them was the sky, and below them was the ground. It was a place where the sky was round and the earth was round. You chased away the guide that came to your door. Are you ready to lead the way? Shadow Song patted his flat chest and said, "Every big organization has a base in Purple Sieve Sky. They will not move for tens of thousands of years. Where do you want to go? Just tell me." Gu Nan thought about it and said, "What is the best place to earn origin crystals?" Origin crystals were the currency used by Break World people and Star Masters. They might not be able to buy rare items, but they were worth a lot. Of course, it is. Galaxy World Door. In front of a teleporter in Purple Sieve Sky, Gu Nan and Shadow Song's bodies emerged. Gu Nan was holding a blue orb. "Is this an origin crystal?" Gu Nan played with the orb in his hand. He looked curious. Even at the transcendent level, currency was not commonly seen. That was because most of the elites leveled up in different ways. They did not have a common goal, so it was difficult for currency to exist. Breaking World and above were different. At least, at Break World and Star Master levels, they were chasing the same thing about the original of the world. But Break World people mainly observed and learned. Star Masters needed to absorb it. Origin crystals, as the name suggested, were crystals that were generated by the original of the world. Spirit crystals were very troublesome to create, and it required a lot of strength from the maker. Ordinary Star Lords couldn't even unseal it, let alone imitate it. Therefore, the purchasing power of origin crystals was slightly higher than its actual value, and the production process accounted for a considerable part of it. In addition to being a circulating currency, spirit stones could also be used to exchange for highly active world origin, which was the main way to cash spirit stones. Such a special currency system was the result of tens of thousands of years of development in the heavenly planes, and it was still used in the world today. The one in Gu Nan's hand was such an origin crystal, but it was of the smallest denomination and only contained one unit of origin source. In Purple Civ Sky, Break World elites and Star Lords were not allowed to teleport. They had to go through Purple Civ Sky's teleporter. The transfer array naturally had to be charged. Gu Nan hadn't even seen a source crystal before, so he naturally had to rely on the rich and imposing Shadow Song. By the way, why do you still have origin crystals on you after being sealed for so long? None of your business. Gu Nan could only shrug at Shadow Song's uncooperative attitude. But this little interlude didn't affect their arrival in the territory of a large organization. Astral Gate. Purple Civ Sky was a top neutral plane. Here, Gu Nan had even found a remote organization like Ming Lu. There was no need to even mention the Astral Gate. The Astral Gate was a famous organization in the heavenly planes, and it was famous for its openness. Anyone could join. Inside this organization, there was a mature trading system to ensure that members could trust each other. Even a small character like Land Marigold, after entering the Astral Gate, was able to use her own power to gain the appreciation of a Break World elite. That was enough to explain the problem. How could they ensure it? Simple. If they didn't follow the rules, they could just hunt them down and kill their entire race. Truly large organizations and forces basically used this method to ensure the loyalty of their members. After Gu Nan and Shadow Song exited the teleporter, they found themselves in a city. Countless people of different ranks walked the street. Gu Nan looked around. There were cultivators and mortals mixed together. There was no difference. He even saw a Break World elite. Only an organization with an extremely high level of power could form such a structure. I am going to join the Astral Gate. Do you want to come? Gu Nan looked at Shadow Song. Of course. If I don't go with you, what if someone kidnaps me? Shadow Song said, Are you kidding me? And I am an 11-star member of the Astral Gate. I can take you along. The Astral Gate was a completely open organization, so it was very popular among the casual cultivators. Even Shadow Song had been there for a while. Shadow Song took Gu Nan to the main hall of the Astral Gate. It was just like what Gu Nan had seen in Tianji Dojo. Every space was divided into pieces. Gu Nan was used to this. He knew the interior of Shanghai Pavilion had to be like this. Tianji Dojo Master had learned this from there. Welcome back, 11-star member, Blood Song. Gu Nan and Shadow Song entered at the same time. They were separated into the same space. A soft female voice sounded in front of them. Change your code name, Shadow Song. Shadow Song's first words were to change her old code name. She did not explain why she was doing this, but Gu Nan could guess. She did not want the people from back then to know who she was now. Change of code name confirmed. Recorded. The gentle female voice quickly responded to Shadow Song's request. The voice sounded gentle and sweet, but the underlying tone didn't seem to change at all. Shadow Song was very familiar with the Astral Gate. Without pausing, she said, Recommend a new member. However, the response from the Astral Realm Gate surprised her. Order confirmed. No suitable target detected. Welcome back, ordinary member, evil god. The last sentence was clearly meant for Gu Nan. Gu Nan had the experience of coming into contact with the Astral Gate when he was at the Third Order. He had left a record inside. Shadow Song was stunned. She immediately realized what had happened. She pointed at Gu Nan and laughed. Ha 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 ha. Ordinary member. An evil god. What a lame code name. Gu Nan was already used to Shadow Song's sudden actions, so he didn't take it to heart. He had just casually chosen a code name. It was not suitable to use it now. As his level grew higher, he might come into contact with people from the Pantheon world. Was using the code name, Evil God, not asking for trouble? Gu Nan glanced at Shadow Song. Can I change my code name as I please? I won't repeat it? Shadow Song was still in a state of hysterical laughter. She finally said, You can change if you don't find it troublesome. It doesn't matter if it's repeated. The astral gate records your own laws. Gu Nan nodded. Change code name. Shadow Song's father. The laughter finally stopped. If you want to read some light novels, go to Chapter 231. Wulin Chinese Network. The newest chapter, Crossing the Sky and Becoming an Evil God. Welcome, Shadow Song's father. Because you are just an ordinary member, the mission list is temporarily closed. The gentle female voice echoed in the space of the astral gate. Shadow Song's face darkened. If her strength had recovered, she would have jumped up and broken Gu Nan's knees. Bastard! Change your name. Look, I don't even have the authority to accept a mission. Help me level up first, Gu Nan said seriously. He came to the astral gate, or rather, purple sieve sky, to accept some missions and obtain spirit crystals to exchange for active world sources. This was what normal world breakers did. Gu Nan wanted to see what kind of response the evil god temple would give him. Gu Nan had an astral gate rank before, but that was when he was level 3. In the astral gate, the system before and after world breakers were completely different. The previous star ranks had to be converted. Gu Nan's star rank could only be converted to that of an ordinary member. Fortunately, he now had a noble 11-star member to recommend him. Shadow Song's face darkened. Are you sure you'll change your name after I recommend you? Of course. I always keep my word. I can't change my relative's name. No problem. A moment later, the new 5-star member, Gu Nan, chose to change his code name again. An 11-star member is really high class. He directly raised me to 5-star. Gu Nan muttered. Change code name. Shadow Song's next-door neighbor, Uncle Wang. When they came out of the astral gate, Shadow Song's resentful eyes circled around Gu Nan's back. It was as if she wanted to poke a few holes in him. Gu Nan didn't take this to heart at all. He usually liked to do things in the most direct way, but that didn't mean he wouldn't do things in a roundabout way. He could just kill an NPC directly, so he didn't think there was a need to go around in circles. Moreover, the players were all good at making fun of people with these strange game IDs. After successfully becoming a 5-star member, Gu Nan's authority was indeed much higher. He easily found a mission that was more suitable for him to complete and had a good reward. Hunt down the traitor Sinberg. No matter how powerful an organization the Astral Gate was, it was inevitable that there would be rebellions. After all, when benefits were at the forefront, there would always be people who could not restrain their desires. Sinberg was an extraordinaire, and his strength was close to the level of a Dowlord. During a mission, he killed his companions, stole the mission item, and fled. Now, his whereabouts had already been locked by the Astral Gate, and he was in a small world. Gue Haishur. When Gu Nan stepped into this place with Shadow Song, he immediately felt that the name wasn't wrong. The Ghost Sea world was a very special plane. It was similar to the Violet Sieve Heaven in that it was a flat plane with no planet. However, the land here was a boundless sea of ghosts, with countless resentful souls roaming about. If one fell into it, it would be hard for a break-world person to survive. Whether it was a cultivator or a normal person, they could only live on a floating island in the sky above the Ghost Sea. Hello, mister. I am 6-star movement. Gu Nan and Shadow Song used a teleporter to descend. There were already people from the Astral Gate waiting there, so they quickly greeted them. It was not easy to lock onto Sinberg's location. There were 10 people standing in front of Gu Nan. The leader was a man wearing a black tuxedo. He was the one who had spoken. Among the members of the Astral Gate, Low-level people would usually greet each other and report their level. This man with the code name Movement was already a 6-star member. Looking at his level, he was higher than Gunan. Of course, the ranks of extraordinaires could not compare to break world people. Hello. Gunan nodded at everyone. I am Shadowsong's neighbor, Uncle Wang. This long list of names was easily announced by Gunan. Shadowsong, who was next to him, looked gloomy. Movement was frozen. Mr. Wang, yes, this is Shadowsong. Gunan was very polite. He did not forget to introduce Shadowsong to everyone. A moment later, the hunting team, led by Yu Zhang, stood beside Gunan with awkward smiles on their faces. Gunan, on the other hand, was learning about the target's information with a serious expression. Sinberg's situation was also known in the Astral Gate, but it would not be as detailed as it was here. Sinberg was a westernized name. It meant he did not come from a big plane. In the world of worlds, only small planes had xenogeneic civilizations. It was rare to even see black and white people. The hunting team's information confirmed this. In fact, the Ghost Sea was Sinberg's home. That was why he had chosen to return there. He wanted to use the special terrain of the Ghost Sea to buy himself time. Buying time? Gunan finally raised his brows when he saw this and spoke. Yes, Movement said seriously. Sinberg betrayed the organization for a bottle of star water. After he betrayed us, his power improved very quickly. Last time, I could not beat him. Movement was a true leader. Even with someone helping him, he could not beat Sinberg. That meant he was only one step away from breaking the world. He could break through at any time. It was no wonder that after the Astral Gate understood the situation, it assigned the task to the Breakers. They did not want to send a few leaders to kill him. But no matter how fast Sinberg's power improved, it was nothing to Gunan. He asked, "Where is the target now?" "Right now we can only confirm that he is on one of the 3 floating islands," Movement said. He gave the names of the 3 floating islands. "We did not want to alert the enemy. Now that you are here, you can lock down the floating islands." Gunan nodded. Facing a target that he was not sure he could keep, he could not rush to close the net. "Tell the managers of the 3 floating islands to come see me," Gunan said quickly. "Lock down the floating islands. Do not allow anyone to leave." Yu Zhang and the others nodded in unison, but at this moment, a crisp voice sounded from the side. "No. We cannot lock down the floating islands." Gunan raised his head and looked over. A young girl with a frosty expression was walking quickly towards him. "Yu Zhang, have you forgotten what I told you?" The girl shouted at Yu Zhang as soon as she appeared. Her righteous expression made Lu Zhang feel a little ashamed. She even glanced at Gunan uneasily. "If you lock down the floating islands for a long time, it will easily cause the ghost air to flow in. Then, the entire floating island will be destroyed. Which one of you can take responsibility for that?" The girl did not hesitate to speak. She exposed the truth that Movement was hiding. "Is that so?" Gunan's voice sounded. His calm gaze made Movement even more uneasy. After all, he was indeed in the wrong. In order to complete the task, he had concealed the truth that he was going to commit a great sin. If the person in front of him thought that he had deliberately made him bear the sin of killing, he would not be able to wash himself clean even if he jumped into the Yellow River. The girl looked at this scene with satisfaction. She believed that the despicable Movement would get what he deserved. "Yes, but—" Movement quickly opened his mouth. He seemed to want to find an excuse for himself, but he was interrupted by Gunan. "In that case, just lock down the 3 floating islands. Won't the target be dead?" Gunan said with a puzzled expression. "What a waste of time. Go to Apex Novel Network for reading light novels." Chapter 232. As soon as Gunan's voice fell, the whole scene seemed to fall silent. Whether it was Lu Zhang or the girl, they all looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. The 2 of them could not be blamed, as Gunan's words were too shocking. The girl stared at Gu Nan for a while, and finally realized that the guy in front of her was not joking, so she said fiercely, "Ridiculous!" Then, he quickly disappeared. Lu Zhang smiled awkwardly, surprised at the fierceness of this lord, but also very glad that he had come. If his character was too gentle, he was afraid that with the girl's identity, it would be easy to suppress him, and then there would be no hope for his mission. "It's not easy to seal off the floating island," Lu Zhang said with a wry smile. "After all, we need the help of the floating island's master. If we let them lock up their territory," Lu Zhang said with a wry smile, "then find someone from the other floating islands to do it." Gu Nan had a "you're so stupid" expression on his face. "We've killed the high-level forces of 3 floating islands, and there's a lot of good territory left. Don't tell me none of the other floating islands are tempted?" Lu Zhang was stunned again. He finally realized that the person in front of him really wanted to do this, even at the cost of provoking a war in the Sea of Ghosts. And from a practical point of view, it was not impossible. Lu Zhang quickly shook his head, throwing this terrible idea out of his head. He believed that he was not a person without a bottom line like the other party. In order to chase down a target, he would bury thousands of innocent people. At least, he would not do that unless it was absolutely necessary. However, Gu Nan's cold gaze fell straight on his face. "What other questions do you have?" The indifference in Gu Nan's eyes made Lu Zhang's heart feel as if it was being gripped by an invisible hand, and he was somewhat speechless. He knew that if he could not give a satisfactory answer, the other party was likely to turn hostile. Even if he would not kill due to the rules of the Astral Gate, it would certainly not be easy to bear. A drop of cold sweat appeared on Lu Zhang's forehead, but he hurriedly said, "Sealing the entire floating island is too inefficient and time-consuming. We already have some clues about the target, why don't we give it a try first?" He finished his speech very quickly. Finally, Gu Nan was able to understand a little. Gu Nan nodded his head, indicating for him to continue. The movement breathed a sigh of relief. He was born in a sky-class plane. He had seen many world breakers, so he had some understanding of all kinds of cultivators. Some of the break world people were easy to get along with. They could even make friends with normal people. Some of them were so high up that they treated human lives like dirt. Lu Zhang believed that the person in front of him belonged to the latter, so he didn't use any righteous words to persuade him. Instead, he used the word efficiency. There were as many floating islands in the Ghost Sea as there were hairs on an ox, and they were of different sizes. Some were as big as a city in the astral realm, while some were as small as a few football fields. One could see the borders with a single glance. Gu Nan was now on a medium-sized floating island called Yantai with Lu Zhang and the others, waiting for news. There were clues about Sinberg on all 3 floating islands. Some people had seen Sinberg, and some were even related to him. They didn't dare to alert him before, but now that Gu Nan was in charge, they could naturally go and test him. As long as Sinberg dared to show up on this floating island, Gu Nan could kill him in an instant. While they were waiting for news, Shadow Song naturally followed beside Gu Nan. She wasn't very interested in Gu Nan's mission. Instead, she was more interested in the girl from before. "What's the girl's name?" Shadow Song asked Lu Zhang excitedly. "She looks older than you." Before Lu Zhang could speak, Gu Nan answered. "I've lived for tens of thousands of years, but she still looks bigger than you. I mean breast." Shadow Song turned his head with a dark face and stared fiercely at Lu Zhang. His stare made the young man's hair stand on end. He quickly explained the girl's origin. In fact, it wasn't complicated. The girl's name was Zhu Qin. She was also a member of the Astral Gate, but she wasn't a participant in this mission. Instead, she was a native of the Ghost Sea world. The Ghost Sea world was really a very small plane. When the people from the Astral Gate had just arrived, Zhu Qin was the first to notice it, and the 2 sides came into contact. This kind of situation was actually not uncommon. After all, there were Astral Gate members in all the major planes. When someone went here to do a mission, sometimes their companions would also help. Of course, there might be counterproductive situations. Zhu Qin was an example. She held a rather uncooperative attitude toward the operation of Lu Zhang and the others this time. For example, when Lu Zhang wanted to lightly seal off a certain floating island, she strongly opposed it. Zhu Qin's opposition wasn't a joke. She had a solid foundation. She was just an ordinary extraordinary, but her identity wasn't simple at all. To put it simply, she was the little princess of the Ghost Sea world. Although the Ghost Sea world wasn't big, it also had a government group, and it was a feudal empire. The current king was Zhu Qin's biological father, so she could be considered a princess in name only. The princess of this broken place is useless, right? Shadow Song wasn't stupid. She knew that for an organization like the Astral Gate, Zhu Qin's identity was nothing. Lu Zhang had a wry smile, but before he could speak, someone next to him said, "It's because she has a good sister." This was the same as Lu Zhang. He was a member of the team who had come to carry out the mission. Clearly, he had a lot of resentment toward Zhu Qin for blocking his way. Her sister is a world breaker, but she isn't a member of the organization, Lu Zhang added. This was the real answer. World breaker. During the mission, the Astral Gate would protect the members who were carrying out the mission, but what about when the mission ended? If Zhu Qin didn't like one of them and wanted her sister to teach them a lesson, then their team would be in trouble. Plus, Zhu Qin's sister was from the Ghost Sea world. If their team stirred up trouble there and made a world breaker unhappy, they might not be on their side. Fortunately, Gu Nan had come. Only a break world being could not care less about Zhu Qin. Only a break world being able to do anything to capture Sinberg. Why isn't she cooperating? Gu Nan stroked his chin. His question wasn't a question. It sounded like he was talking to himself. Protect the environment? Save the world? Doesn't seem like it. After listening to Lu Zhang's story, Gu Nan wasn't concerned about Zhu Qin's sister. He was concerned about something else. Go and find out what happened to Xianberg in the past few years. See if he had anything to do with Zhu Qin, Gu Nan said to Lu Zhang. Or check on her sister and Xianberg. When Gu Nan said this, his eyes fell into the distance. He looked cold. Chapter 233. The probe on Yantai floating island soon came to a conclusion. Unsurprisingly, there weren't any valuable clues. What Sinberg left behind here was that he once had a one-night stand with a female student. But Sinberg didn't make the slightest move even after Movement's people kidnapped the female student. Capture that female student, chop off 2 fingers, and send them to her parent. Tell them you kidnapped her for ransom and make a big deal out of it, Gu Nan said calmly. The Ghost Sea was a feudal society, so the level of technology wasn't low. The 3 floating islands that Sinberg was suspected to be on were all in the same area. If they made a big deal out of it here, he wouldn't have to worry about not getting some information. It would be best if they could alert Sinberg, but it didn't matter if they couldn't. It was just a casual move. Movement quickly ordered people to do it. His mind was more focused on what Gu Nan had said before about the relationship between Sinberg, Zhu Qin, and even her sister. Thinking about it carefully, it really wasn't impossible. The clues on the other 2 floating islands still needed some preparation before they could really start probing. So, Gu Nan and Shadow Song temporarily separated from Movement's team. That Zhu Qin, do you really think she has something to do with the target? Shadow Song walked around Gu Nan, asking all sorts of questions. I can't rule out that possibility, Gu Nan said after thinking for a moment. But it has nothing to do with you, right? I'm also here to do a mission. Why doesn't it have anything to do with me? Hee. Gu Nan used these 2 words to express his attitude clearly. Okay. Shadow Song put on an indifferent look. Then what are you going to do next? Wait for further information? Faced with this question, Gu Nan just shook his head. Shadow Song's eyes kept sizing him up. All of Gu Nan's expressions, movements, eyes, and even the small unconscious movements of his body were captured by her. This descendant of the blood ancestor had passed through generation after generation, but his will was still no different from that of the first generation. Of course, she didn't come to follow Gu Nan just for fun. Gu Nan's strange performance in the world of heroes also aroused Shadow Song's interest. She wanted to know what was so special about Gu Nan. There must be some sort of consideration for that person to send him to his side. Perhaps her goal could be read from Gu Nan. Since there might be a problem with Zhu Qin, why don't we just ask her directly? Gu Nan gave such an answer. On a floating island in the Ghost Sea, in an exquisite villa in the central city. Zhu Qin pushed open the door and walked in with quick step. Her face was cold as if she was owed $5 million and hadn't returned it. Of course, with her status, it would be easy for her to be owed $5 million. Bastard. Idiot. Psycho. As soon as Zhu Qin walked into the villa, she immediately flew into a rage and fiercely smashed everything around her. How can there be such a person? The room wasn't empty. There was already a young man and a woman there. Seeing Zhu Qin like this, the man smiled faintly and said, "What's going on? Who dares to provoke our little highness and make him so angry?" Zhu Qin glared at him and snorted heavily. "Another person from our organization has come, and it's a madman. He said that all 3 floating islands are sealed." "There's such a person?" The man couldn't help but laugh and shake his head. "What a fantasy! Big Brother Xin made the right decision to leave your organization early." The woman beside him also smiled and said, "Little Qin, your organization is really interesting. Just a random person can seal off 3 floating islands?" This made Zhu Qin frown slightly. She wanted to refute, but she didn't know where to start. These 2 people were her half-brother Zhu Wen and his fiancée Yan Xuexin. They were also cultivators with extraordinary strength. However, the 2 of them came from a small place like the Ghost Sea, so their vision naturally couldn't be very high. Zhu Qin, on the other hand, had her sister's guidance and joined the Astral Gate early on. Only then did she know how big the outside world was. The person she met today was indeed a madman, but the Astral Gate wasn't a simple organization. It was a true colossus. Thinking that Brother Xin had betrayed the organization and was still being hunted, Zhu Qin felt an inexplicable sense of irritation. Zhu Wen and Yan Xuexin naturally didn't understand Zhu Qin's thoughts. However, they were wholeheartedly giving advice and suggestions. "Little Qin, if your organization keeps sending people over, Brother Xin will be exposed sooner or later." Zhu Wen became serious and said in a low voice, "Why don't we do something?" "Absolutely not." Zhu Qin was shocked and hurriedly interrupted Zhu Wen. Her attitude was even more resolute than before. After all, stopping Lu Zhang was out of her sense of social responsibility. Stopping Zhu Wen was purely because she didn't want to die. It was fine if they didn't cooperate, but if they openly obstructed the Astral Gate's operation, they would provoke the organization's revenge. Zhu Qin even regretted letting her brother and sister-in-law get to know Brother Xin. They couldn't help much, but the trouble they caused could be fatal. Zhu Wen and Yan Xuexin didn't agree with Zhu Qin's cautiousness. Yan Xuexin laughed and said, "Little Qin, you don't spend much time here. Don't underestimate yourself." "That's right." Zhu Wen put down the wine glass in his hand. He looked excited. "All these years? The things I brought back have helped our overall power. It is something you can't even imagine." Zhu Wen? It was Zhu Qin's big sister. She was a genius world breaker from the Ghost Sea. With her identity as a world breaker, it was not difficult for her to help her hometown. "Little Qin, don't forget," Zhu Wen said. "Brother Xion's genius is Lian Xiu. I approve of him." Zhu Wen tried his best to persuade Zhu Qin, hoping she would agree to help. She wouldn't be like she was now, where she only dared to secretly report. He didn't expect a shadow had secretly come to the villa. Your paranoia is really accurate. Shadow Song's voice sounded. It wasn't so much a compliment to Gu Nan's accuracy, but it was more of a mockery. Zhu Qin and the others suddenly turned around. They saw Gu Nan and Shadow Song standing calmly at the door. Zhu Qin recognized Gu Nan. Her face changed as she said, "It's you. Humph. Do you think you can force us to tell you where Brother Xin is by finding us?" With her big sister as her shield, Zhu Qin wasn't afraid of the people from the astral gate making things difficult for her. Zhu Wen, who was at the side, was even more fearless. He firmly believed that in his own Gue Haishi's territory, foreign organizations would have to coil first even if they were dragons. So, he slowly said, "I wonder if you—" Before Zhu Wen's voice could reach them, a black shadow suddenly jumped out. It split into three and went for the three of them. Zhu Wen and Yan Xuexin didn't even have the chance to make a sound as they were directly engulfed by the black shadows. Zhu Qin similarly didn't have the time to react, but the pendant in front of her chest lit up with white light, gradually revealing the figure of a woman. Chapter 234. Wulin Chinese Network, the latest chapter of Crossing the Heavens and Becoming an Evil God. Inside Zhu Qin's villa, Zhu Wen and Yan Xuexin were already completely lifeless. After being engulfed by Gu Nan's shadow power, there was no way they could survive. Zhu Qin, who was not much stronger than them, did not die instantly. Instead, she was protected by the pendant in front of her chest. With just a thought, she could block Gu Nan's attack. Her identity was self-evident. This woman was Zhu Qin's sister, world breaker Zhu Yuxiang. This break-world person was not an ordinary person. She had straight hair that reached her waist. She was wearing white clothes. Even her skin looked pale. If there was anything to describe her, it would be the word female ghost. Zhu Qin, on the other hand, was already used to her elder sister's appearance. The moment she saw her elder sister appear, she immediately shouted, "Elder sister, it's this person. He's here to look for Brother Xin." After saying this, Zhu Qin looked at Gu Nan with a slightly smug expression. This kind of expression was like two children fighting, and one side suddenly saw their parents coming, and immediately became fearless. What Zhu Qin didn't expect was that the person standing in front of her was also an adult, and he was here for her family's adult. Zhu Xiang, who looked like a female ghost. He looked at Gu Nan cautiously. With her experience, it was impossible for her to not recognize the other party after personally exchanging blows with him. "Who are you?" His voice seemed to have come from the nine hells, and there was a coldness that was hidden deep in his bones. Seeing as she was willing to help her hometown and her family, she was not a heartless person. After all, she had just leveled up not too long ago. Gu Nan did not say anything. His heart was beating slightly. The Spellbreaker attribute had been completely activated. Zhu, the one who had descended through her sister, was only a clone, but the strange undulations on Gu Nan's body still made her immediately alert. But her vigilance was useless. After a dozen years in the fairy demon world, Gu Nan was back to his best condition. Facing a new break-world clone, his breaking power was almost invincible. Only to see Zhu? Traces of ghost chi began to rise around her, but Gu Nan just casually stretched out his hand and grabbed, directly grabbing all her ghost chi, and even Zhu Yeshio. All the doppelgangers were captured at the same time. Gu Nan holds Zhu Xiang in place with one hand. The clone's neck asked calmly, "Where is Sinberg?" "Zhu?" The doppelganger's eyes were still cold. After all, it was just a doppelganger. Even though she could see that his strength was far above hers, she still tried to communicate with Gu Nan. In her opinion, the people from the astral gate were not so stubborn. As long as there were enough benefits and risks, they would make the right choice. Sir, however, Gu Nan only used one sentence to stop Zhu Xiang. All the words, "If you don't tell me, I'll kill your whole family." Sinberg was a mixed-race child. His mother was white, so he was half white. Perhaps it was because of this white blood that he was taller than his peers since he was young. His skin was also whiter, and even the color of his pupils was lighter. At this time, Sinberg was sitting leisurely in his home. There was a glass of blood-red fruit wine in front of him, and he was drinking it by himself. Of course, he knew that the people from the astral gate were after him. He had already expected this from the moment he killed his companions and took away the star water. The astral gate is indeed a large organization that can move freely in the heavens. It's really difficult. Sinberg drank another mouthful of fruit wine and muttered to himself with a headache. Very few people knew that this was not the first time Sinberg had done this kind of thing. It could be said that his history of success was constantly joining various large organizations. Then, when there was a suitable mission target, he would suddenly betray them and conveniently take away extremely valuable resources. In the heavens there were many people like Sinberg, but there were also many who died. This was a real high-risk industry. However, Sinberg also had his own reliance. That was, he had a wide network of people, and he could always find people who were willing to help him. Of course, Sinberg was not stupid enough to find the same people to help him every time. In fact, this was the first time he had used his hometown. If everything goes well, with the help of the star water, I will be able to break the world soon enough. Then, Sinberg was drinking fruit wine. There was not much alcohol in it, but his eyes started to blur. Sinberg's eyes were blurred. After all, he had been walking on the edge of life and death for many years. The moment his consciousness became depressed, his whole body woke up. His heart was filled with danger. To be able to make him fall silently, and it was such a familiar method. Sinberg had a wry smile on his face. When he woke up, he found that all the arrangements he had made near his house had been instantly broken by someone. I did not expect this. Sinberg turned his head to look to the side. There were 4 people slowly walking over. One of them was Zhu Xiang. Of the 4 people, Sinberg only recognized 2. Aside from Zhu Xiang, there was also his sister, Zhu Qin. The other 2 people were a white-clothed young man and a man in a black tuxedo. To be more accurate, there were 5 people. On the left side of the white-clothed young man was a little girl. To be exact, there were 5 people. On the left side of the white-clothed young man was a little girl. Sinberg was very clear that these 2 people were most likely from the astral gate. He used the words, "I did not expect this," to express all his thoughts. Zhu Xiang was helping the astral gate. He really did not expect this. Was the astral gate really that powerful? Sinberg did not have much time to think. He saw the white-clothed young man say to the side, "Is he Sinberg? Can you confirm it?" The man in the tuxedo next to him respectfully said, "His appearance and presence match. If we can capture him alive and let the organization confirm it, that would be great." But Sinberg sneered. The people from the astral gate were too arrogant. Lianzhu? They all knew they had to do it in secret. That was the only way to get close to him. Why did these people not understand that? He did not have the power to face a break-world being, but it was not impossible to escape from a break-world being. Sinberg took out a small bottle from somewhere and threw it on the ground. The person next to Gu Nan was undoubtedly Yi Zhang. When he saw Sinberg's action, he was shocked. Not good. That is the remnant of the star water. The star water was an extremely unstable high-energy substance. If it was thrown like this, it would immediately explode violently. Under Yu Zhang's astonished gaze, Gu Nan suddenly took a step forward, grabbed the small bottle with one hand, and then crushed it. The star water splashed, but under the absolute isolation of the break world's power, it was like an ordinary potion, slowly dripping on the ground. Drip, drip. The sound of the liquid dripping was particularly clear in the silent scene. Zhu Qin covered her mouth, trying hard not to cry out, but her eyes were filled with pain. Zhu Xiang could not help but shake his head gently, as if he felt sorry for Sinberg. As for Sinberg himself, he fell into deep despair. If you want to read a refreshing novel, go to Apex Novel website. Chapter 235. Wulin Chinese sister, why are you doing this? Zhu Qin shouted at her sister, her face full of dissatisfaction. Normally, she wouldn't believe that she would have such an attitude towards her most respected sister. At this time, the two had already returned to the villa. Xianberg's hands and feet were broken on the spot and taken away by the people of the Astral Gate. What Zhu Qin couldn't understand was that her sister, who was omnipotent in her heart, would actually personally lead the way to find Brother Xian because of that person's threat. That person is very strong. Zhu Qin's face was expressionless as she said calmly, "If I don't help him find Xianberg, then he can do what he says." Zhu Qin was stunned. She seemed to be trying to recall which sentence Gu Nan had said. Soon, she thought of it. That Zhu Qin actually gave up just like that. "It's really boring," Shadow Song muttered discontentedly as if she didn't see a good show. Her main purpose in coming here was to observe Gu Nan. In the end, because the opponent was too weak or too sensible, there was no effect at all. Xianberg didn't make any more trouble. No matter how many tricks he had, they were all at the level of the third stage. Star Water was his last trump card. Even this trick was easily countered by Gu Nan. What else could he do to turn things around? Now this traitor had already been sent to the Astral Gate by Gu Nan. After being verified and executed, Gu Nan's mission would be considered complete. This level of mission was really not difficult for Gu Nan. He was too lazy to look for clues bit by bit, so he directly went to the opponent's biggest backer. It was good that his backer was obedient. Otherwise, he would just start a massacre. When Gu Nan returned to the Purple Sieve Heaven, where the Astral Gate was located, the mission reward was in his account. "Welcome back, 5-star member Shadow Song's neighbor Uncle Wang." The soft female voice of the Star Soul sounded again, reading out this code name without any hindrance. Gu Nan didn't look at Shadow Song's fiery eyes and received the mission reward. As a public organization, the Astral Gate naturally wouldn't do things like contribution points. They only gave 2 rewards. One was physical objects or currency, while the other was points related to a member's level. For example, Gu Nan got 120 units of spirit stones and 5 star points. Every time he accumulated 100 star points, he could upgrade his member's level. It was a very simple and clear rule, and it was precisely because of this that it was suitable for those who did one vote and left. This was the logic of an open organization. Immediately afterward, Gu Nan divided 100 units of source crystals in his hand and replaced them all with active origin source. This was the purpose of his trip. How will the evil divine palace react to this highly active world source energy? Gu Nan asked as he lightly stretched out his hand and touched the source energy before him. This was not the first time that Gu Nan had come into contact with the world origin. In fact, it was not even the evil divine temple. Back in the White Mist organization, he obtained the World Wills mission through the translation method, and the final feedback to the translator was the world origin. It was just that the evil divine temple's feedback was a private copy. Until now, there were still a lot of incomplete private copies lying in Gu Nan's copy space. Similarly, the world origin of the immortal and demon world was very normal. Once Gu Nan gained control of it, the world would also be under his control. If not for this, Gu Nan wouldn't have been able to adjust the coordinates of the immortal and demon world. It was just that he wasn't strong enough, otherwise he could hide the immortal and demon world in the blink of an eye. Now that he was exchanging spirit stones for a common commodity in the heavenly planes, what was the so-called highly active source energy? The evil divine temple quickly gave him an answer. It vibrated slightly and a message that Gu Nan completely didn't expect was transmitted. Discovered a fragmented, ownerless divine fire. Do you want to contaminate it? Gu Nan stared blankly at this notification. It was as if thousands of divine beasts were stampeding through his heart. Thousands of words could only be summed up in one sentence. So the world origin is the divine fire. Why didn't you say so earlier? At this moment, Gu Nan finally realized the greatest use of the evil divine temple. It was to translate everything in this world into game terms that he could understand. Divinity, God's kingdom, divine fire. These were all things that could only be found in the game. The Pantheon world might have them too, but Gu Nan had yet to come into contact with them. The relationship between these three things was very simple. Divinity was the core of the gods, and they used it to mobilize their divine power. The gods' kingdom was the foundation for the gods to become gods, and also the source of divine power. And the divine fire was the proof that the gods controlled the gods' kingdom. There were divine fires everywhere in the gods' kingdom, and the divine fire was the law that belonged to the gods. Only then could the gods control the changes in the gods' kingdom. The so-called igniting the divine fire did not refer to igniting it in the divinity, but in the gods' kingdom. And once the gods fell, the divine fire in the gods' kingdom would be extinguished, and the gods' kingdom would naturally become ownerless. Gu Nan was very familiar with these three things. Now that the evil divine temple was telling him that Gao Hua's world origin was the fragmented ownerless fire, Gu Nan immediately understood. The divine fire represented the law that belonged to the god. Wasn't that the world origin controlled by the astral lord? And in a world that was not controlled by the astral lord, the world origin was, of course, the ownerless fire. No wonder the translation method only allowed him to obtain a private copy. That was because the world will itself did not give out the world origin at all. It was just a display. Only by directly plundering it by a cultivator could the world origin be truly extracted, regardless of whether it originally had an owner or not. In the eyes of Shadow Song, Gu Nan's expression was changing rapidly. Sometimes he was surprised, and sometimes he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, as if he had encountered something that he could not do anything about. Of course, she didn't know that just this one word had given Gu Nan a deeper understanding of this world. This world really does correspond to the game. Even the loopholes in the game's settings have been fixed. Gu Nan couldn't help but sigh. In the game, the world origin didn't count as a god's kingdom, so there was naturally no divine fire. However, in this real world, the instance dungeons were also planes that existed in reality. That was why Gu Nan didn't realize it in the first place. In his mind, there was no such thing as a god's kingdom. But now, everything was clear. Contaminate the divine fire, Gu Nan ordered as his consciousness sank into the evil divine temple. The evil god was the opposite of the gods. The gods represented the most normal operation of the world, while the evil god wanted to contaminate it. Whether it was the divine fire or the divine spark, it was all the same. 100 spirit crystals in exchange for the world origin wasn't much. Not long after, another notification came from the evil divine temple. Divine fire contamination completed. Obtained 20 sin points, 200 points. Inside the evil divine temple, Gu Nan couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. At this moment, he seemed to have truly understood that sentence. That sentence that would always appear in the game's CG. Blasphemy is sin. If you want to read a novel, go to the Apex Novel Network. Chapter 236. Wulin Chinese Network. Crossing the Sky to Become an Evil God was the latest chapter. Blasphemy was a sin. In some ways, this was Gu Nan's mission. Since he had obtained the identity of the evil god, he naturally had to stand on the opposite side of the gods. When his consciousness returned from Evil God Hall, Gu Nan looked around. Shadow Song was still calmly looking at him. The astral gate's golden light was still flashing. Everything seemed to be the same, but Gu Nan knew that it was still different. Evil God Hall was proving to Gu Nan that his path was the same as the people of this world. That meant, were the NPCs ready to steal from the players? Do you mean you want to settle in Purple Civ Sky? Shadow Song looked at Gu Nan with a strange look. At this time, the two of them were sitting in a small shop. Gu Nan drank a cup of tea leisurely, while Shadow Song sat opposite him with a strange expression on his face. During their conversation just now, Gu Nan had clearly revealed that he intended to settle down in the Ziluo heavens. Purple Civ Sky is a big place. Many break world people want to settle there, right? Gu Nan asked, noticing the strangeness in her words. A big plane meant more resources. If a break world person wanted to improve, there would be more opportunities in a big plane. Normally, Shadow Song said. But this is a special time. Astral World is going to war. Astral World was going to war. Gu Nan knew about that. Long before he came to the Purple Civ Heaven, he had noticed some clues from the actions of the Star Ocean Pavilion. Now that Shadow Song mentioned it, Gu Nan understood what she meant. There was going to be a war. That was an opportunity for break world people and Star Masters. No matter if it was Astral World or someone trying to invade Astral World, they needed to recruit people. Did they not need to pay to recruit people? I understand. Gu Nan nodded. If he had the chance, he didn't mind going back to Astral World. Star Realm, Shanghai Pavilion. The headquarters of Shanghai Pavilion was located on the most prosperous planet in the central galaxy, the Heavenly Planet. For the cultivators of the outer domain, Heavenly Kingdom Planet lived up to its name of Heavenly Kingdom. It was indeed a paradise for cultivation. But on this day, Heaven discovered something that was not quite like Heaven. In a small room in Shanghai Pavilion, one of the three pavilion masters, Yu-Jio, was facing a man and a woman. Yu-Jio had a smile on his calm face, but the faces of the man and woman opposite him were ashen. A great enemy is coming. Old Yu, you still have the mood to attack us at this time? The man looked at Yu-Jio quietly, his eyes filled with disappointment. Yu-Jio stared back at him unwaveringly and said indifferently, "It is precisely because the enemy is coming that Shanghai Pavilion only needs one pavilion master, and you guys are not suitable." Perhaps Yu-Jio's attitude made the woman angry. Even though she was trapped, she still said, "Yu-Jio, who is behind Shanghai Pavilion? You know it better than we do." Yu-Jio laughed. "You guys are trapped, but that person has not responded. Do you guys not understand?" The man and woman looked at each other. Their hearts sank. They knew that Astral World was that person's Astral World. How could she not know what was happening to Shanghai Pavilion? If she knew, things would be even scarier. "Stop talking crap. Hurry up and deal with them." A voice sounded from behind Yu-Jio. It was the young girl, No Return, who was bringing Yi Chen with her. It had only been a year, but Yi Chen had already reached the break world level. The secret techniques of Shanghai Pavilion were extraordinary. The young girl, No Return, had once caused a scene in Shanghai Pavilion. For this reincarnated Buddha, the man and the woman recognized her. Seeing No Return appear, the two of them felt relieved. Although the young girl, No Return, was a top-class break world person, if they teamed up, they would not be able to kill the two of them. It was like Yu-Jio knew what they were thinking. He smiled and said, "We still have to wait for the other two. Oh, they are here." He pointed to the other side. Two more people walked out of the shadows. This time, it was a man and a woman, but the man looked much older. He clearly had the face of a middle-aged man, and his body was a little fat. When he walked in front of everyone, he smiled and said, "Mr. Zhua's subordinate, Shang Rong. Nice to meet you guys." Yu-Jio recognized the name Shang Rong, so he said, "Shang Rong, one of the 5 monuments. She works for that mister." He turned around and looked at the woman who appeared with Shang Rong. He could not tell how strong she was. Could this person also be one of the 5 monuments? No. The woman looked calm and smiled. She denied it. "My name is Gu Nan." Gu Nan, who was far away in Purple Sky, did not know what was happening in Star World. Even if he knew, he would not care. Gu Nan was very happy. He was focused on leveling up. He did not have time to care. Shadow Song had already left. She also had her own things to do, so it was impossible for her to endlessly observe Gu Nan. Not to mention, staying here would only make her suffer. Gu Nan was trying to understand the active source. He was trying to understand the relationship between it and his sin points. The so-called active source was, in fact, an artificially created product. In many sky star path, which was an inner world, the world's original source was much easier to find and obtain than the surface world. The powerful star masters were there to steal the original source. For some low-level original sources, they would seal them and use them as resources to trade with others. That was how the origin crystals came about. The world breakers needed the active source. Big organizations unsealed the original source and gave it to them. Because of that, the active source had to be used immediately. Otherwise, it would be useless. On the other hand, the world breakers and star masters did not have an unlimited amount of original sources. The original source was a rule. The rules that were suitable for one's body could be used better. If it was not suitable, it could only be used to understand other things. But before the active source was unsealed, no one knew what was inside. They could only rely on their luck. According to Gu Nan's calculations, normal break world people who wanted to create rules needed 10,000 units of origin crystals. Of course, that did not include the parts that failed to create and the parts that were used for research. In fact, for most people, research was the most expensive part. In comparison, Gu Nan realized where he had the advantage. With the existence of Evil God Hall, he did not need to do research. It did not reject the original source. No matter what kind it was, it could accept it. That was what set him apart from other world breakers. He could quickly improve his ability to go against nature. If you wanted to read a novel, go to Apex Novel Network. Chapter 237. Gu Nan was extremely familiar with the rules of the game world, and the Evil God's Temple was like a translator that could translate everything in this world into game terms for Gu Nan. Ever since he learned that the origin of the world was the divine fire, Gu Nan had truly embarked on a bright path. He had never reaped sin points so easily since he came to this world for so long. Gu Nan, who was temporarily staying in the purple Civ heaven, felt like he had returned to his time in the game. Every day, he would immerse himself in a large number of quests, finding the ones that suited him and had rich rewards. For a quest master like Gu Nan, this was perhaps the most suitable life for him. In just 3 months, Gu Nan's sin points had reached 1,700, and he had accumulated close to 4,000 points. His sin points had now exceeded the 1,500 mark, but Gu Nan was not in a hurry to construct the third maxim. In the past, he probably would not have waited so long and would have tried to go further. But now that he had a stable source of points and sin points, Gu Nan also had some other ideas. He wanted to throw in 4,000 points at once and obtain a heaven-defying third maxim. Divine Fire Contamination completed, obtained 40 sin points, 400 points. Another absorption of the active origin was completed, and Gu Nan's sin points and points entered his account again. This time, he finally had enough points. Gu Nan immediately sank into the Evil God's Temple and began constructing the third maxim. Beginning construction of third exclusive maxim. Extracting prerequisite maxim, please choose from the known abilities. Choose the following abilities: Spell-breaking staff, gigantification, death. Confirm? No abilities found. Choose to purchase? Purchase confirmed. Please determine the ratio of abilities to be used. Exclusive maxim construction in progress. In the Evil God's Temple, as Gu Nan issued one order after another, he threw in one ability after another, and the construction of the maxim was progressing slowly. The reason why the third maxim that Gu Nan wanted to construct required so many points was because of 2 key points. First of all, this was a law that required 3 abilities. Secondly, Gu Nan didn't have any of the 3 abilities he needed before, so he had to buy them all again. Buying 3 new abilities like this and not being able to use them normally was undoubtedly a huge loss. But Gu Nan did it. Why? Rich. Based on his current progress, by the time Gu Nan collected 2,500 sin points, he would have enough points to advance to the 5th order. Therefore, he could put a lot of points into the 3rd order. After all, at his level, his previous equipment and skills were becoming less and less useful. For example, the effect of Dawn's Praise could be suppressed by Yu-Gi-Oh's Curse Law. His flash attack ability would also gradually be discovered by others. After reaching rank 5, even the damage reduction effect of passivation would be suppressed. This was a suppression caused by levels, and it wasn't something that could be reversed by humans. Therefore, acquiring new and powerful abilities was something that Gu Nan had to do. The 3rd exclusive law, Sky God, has been constructed. With a specific proportion, the 3rd order was completed without any accidents. The 3rd order was called Sky God. This was a law that was born for combat. Unlike the previous 2 laws, it had a short introduction. Sky God, you will naturally possess divinity and can temporarily transform into a sky god. The game's introduction always liked to be deliberately mystifying. In a more gamey language, this law had 2 abilities, one active and one passive. The passive was possessing divinity, and the active was transforming into a sky god. Divinity was a unique characteristic of gods. It was still quite useful in some special circumstances. It could also have unexpected effects when making certain judgments. Therefore, the Sky God Law had a good passive effect. Needless to say, the active effect was the biggest reason why Gu Nan chose this law. Transforming into a sky god was not just transforming into a god, but a real sky god. Super high resistance, HP, and destructive power. An invincible existence that could crush the laws with its body. It was precisely because of this overly powerful effect that the Sky God Law's active effect was often jokingly called Sky God Descending by players. The words descending were enough to describe this law. It should not have appeared in the mortal world. His consciousness returned to his body. Gu Nan slowly stood up. Even Gu Nan could not help but reveal a smile on his face when he successfully constructed the 3rd law. He walked out of the room. This was the place he had bought in Purple Sky. Only world breakers could live in this area. The decorations were very luxurious. There were even professional servants, maids, and butlers. Master. Seeing Gu Nan appear, a maid quickly came forward and said, Mr. Luowen sent someone to deliver 2 boxes of pastries. They are Blue Devil World's specialties. Got it, Gu Nan answered casually. Luowen was his neighbor. He was not cold at all. He was a strange world breaker who was very friendly to ordinary people. To Gu Nan, who was at the same level as him, he was even more friendly. Sometimes, he would come over to say hello and give Gu Nan gift. He would even invite Gu Nan to go on missions with him. If Gu Nan did not know Luowen had a few concubines, Gu Nan would have thought he was gay. Ignoring Luowen's gifts, Gu Nan quickly went to the mission hall of the Astral World's door. He started another day of missions. This time, however, he found one that he was rather interested in the series of missions. To be more accurate, it was a mission that allowed him to earn spirit crystals and settle a personal grudge at the same time. Deep Sea King. Deep Sea King? Not bad. I saw him become a world breaker with my own eyes. Deep Sea King was the one who chased him. If there is a mission like that in front of him, he will not mind doing it. We found out that he has been going to some small planes. I think he has joined some organization to take on missions to earn spirit crystals. If we can lure him here, the 4 of us can attack him together. We have to kill him as soon as possible. In the Star World, inside the Shanghai Pavilion, a group of people were sitting together. They were seriously discussing a small matter. Who were the people sitting there? Shanghai Pavilion only had one leader, Yu-Gi-Oh. There was the reincarnation of Buddha, the girl, No Return. There was one of the 5 monuments, a top world breaker, Shang Rong. There was also Gunyan, who was said to be Zhua's confidant. These 4 top elites were discussing Deep Sea King, a world breaker who had been rated by Shanghai Pavilion as a planet breaker. The question had come from Yujio. Who is this Gunan? Why do we need to pay so much attention to him? Yujio still remembered Gunan, but he did not pay much attention to him. To him, Gunan was just the previous ruler of the 6th system. He had slipped away from Yujio's hands. He had some skill, but that was all. Now, the 3 of them had taken a big detour. They wanted to use Deep Sea King as a point to lure him over without leaving a trace. In Yujio's eyes, this caution was unnecessary. The 4 of them surrounded him. It was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. 2 of them were enough to kill him. But he was not stupid. The girl, No Return, and Shang Rong were clearly not on the same side, but they were still very careful with Gunan. That was enough to explain the problem. Was there something strange about him? Yujio's heart was full of questions like that. He said, "No matter what, if the 3 of you want to kill this person, Shanghai Pavilion will cooperate. If you want to read a novel, go to Apex Novel website." Chapter 238. Wulin Chinese Network. Travel through the sky to be an evil god. Latest chapter. In Shanghai Pavilion, the 4 of them discussed their plans and went their separate ways. Shang Rong and Gunyan left together. They were in an endless galaxy when Gunyan suddenly said, "I am going to the 9th system. If there is a situation here, let me know." Shang Rong was unfamiliar with the term, 9th system, but he reacted quickly. Okay. Shang Rong and the other 4 were called the 5-degree monument. They were quite famous in all the world. The 5-degree monument was a very famous ancient legacy. Every generation, 5 people could get it. They walked the path that was most suitable for them, and every generation was different. The things that were passed down were different from the previous generation. That was the strangest thing about the 5-degree monument. Shang Rong's status among Zhua's subordinates was not low. Otherwise, he would not have been the vanguard to invade Star World. In front of the woman in front of him, he did not put on airs. In fact, Shang Rong had followed Zhuo for many years, but he had never seen the boss pay so much attention to someone. This woman named Gunyan, what was so special about her? Shang Rong and Zhuo's subordinates were the same. They could not help but be curious. Zhuo's half-man, half-woman special form made them dismiss the possibility of her being beautiful. There were not many answers left. The 9th system? Shang Rong looked at Gunyan's disappearing shadow and spoke to himself. He was not worried that Gunyan would not be able to catch up. For break world people, this distance was like turning around. What he really cared about was that when Gunyan came to Star World, she said she wanted to go to the 9th system. Perhaps he could find out where she was from there. In the 9th system, Gunyan was walking down the familiar streets of the Red Carp. She felt as if it was a lifetime ago. In less than 2 years, she had reached the break world level. Although she always believed this day would come, she did not expect it to come so quickly. She did not expect this day to come so soon. Speaking of which, perhaps I should thank that fellow? Gunyan's lips curled into a smile, but there was not much joy in his eyes. She thought of that person again, the person she had accidentally met in one of her reincarnations, and then personally brought to the astral realm. It was that fellow who walked so fast that no one could catch up with him. He had turned this world into such a mess that even the person behind her was paying attention to him. In the blink of an eye, Gunyan had already walked to the door of care for one's family. It was still the same familiar door and wall, but Gunyan felt a little unfamiliar. After all, she was a break world being. Her life level was different from a normal person's. Plus, she had been missing for 2 years. Who knew who was in charge of care for one's family? However, this was not important. Anyway, from today onwards, care for one's family would have a new leader. "Who are you?" A voice sounded next to Gunyan. It was a gray-clothed man who was standing in front of care for one's family. He looked at her with caution. Even in the poorest ninth system, Shanghai Pavilion had sent 2 break-world people. This was one of them. The break-world person did not find Gu Nian. He was just a guest at care for one's family. When he came out, he bumped into Gu Nian. He noticed there was something wrong with the woman. Next to the gray-clothed break-world person, Gu Nian's father, Gu Mingyuan, was walking him out. The moment he saw Gu Nian, it was like he had seen a ghost. However, Gu Nianji did not look at her father. Her gaze moved slowly to the man in gray, and a strange smile appeared on her face. Life and death. Death and life. It was like those words had some special power. They came out of the gray-clothed man's heart. It was like he was in a black and white space. On his left was death. On his right was death. He was standing on the border between the two. The gray-clothed man was shocked. He wanted to use his own rules, but he suddenly saw life and death reversed. The cycle of reincarnation changed. Life and death space was pressed against each other. His consciousness was gone. In Gu Mingyuan's eyes, Gu Nian only looked at the gray-clothed man. The break-world person started to fall to the ground until he was dead. Star World, Central System, Planet Heaven. Deep Sea King was one of the leaders of the Blood-Dependent Alliance. His power was not the best, but his position was top class. His God Hall was on Planet Heaven. Gu Nan was on Planet Heaven. After all, with break-world people's skills, traveling through space did not take much time. However, when Gu Nan found the mission, Kill Deep Sea King, at the Star World Gate, he did not immediately accept it. He did some research. He had returned to the world of immortals and demons. While Yen Xiaoxiao was in control of the God Nation, she had also paid attention to the situation in the astral realm under Gu Nan's request. The news he got from Yen Xiaoxiao was that there was a big change in Shanghai Pavilion. Yu Jiu became the only pavilion master. The signs of war were getting clearer. Typically, there were a lot of break-world people being assassinated these days. There was no need to even mention the superhumans in important positions. Under such circumstances, the quest of killing the king of the deep sea did not seem to be unusual. If they could use money to kill all the break-world people in Star World, the invading forces would be happy to do so. Maybe some people are waiting for me, Gu Nan said in a language that only he understood. It was not that he did not consider the possibility that this mission happened to appear in front of him. With his current power, even if he faced a real Star Master, as long as it was not the kind of existence that controlled a world, he would not be afraid. His sin value had broken through 1,500 points. It was not only the third rule that strengthened him. His evil god body had also been strengthened to a considerable extent. Speaking of the Deep Sea King, Gu Nan was interested in having a chat with him. The reason he came into contact with Deep Sea King was because of the chain of events. Deep Sea King's representative, Qin Xuanji, also had her eyes on the god's personality. According to what they said, that thing should be called a world stone, but its nature would not change. Later, for the sake of this world stone, Deep Sea King even personally chased after him. In the end, he ran into Gu Nan, who had leveled up to level 4. He was hit by the displacement rule, which was 10 times more critical. Since then, Deep Sea King had never appeared in front of Gu Nan again. Gu Nan could not find the time to retaliate, so it had been delayed until now. Now was the time. Gu Nan also wanted to know where this bloodkin had gotten this information. Lan Si and her brother had also come for God's stone. Could Deep Sea King have something to do with the world of gods? These questions needed to be confirmed by Deep Sea King himself. Now Gu Nan stood in front of the door of the Deep Sea Temple, calmly looking at the solemn palace. Someone noticed Gu Nan's presence and asked cautiously, "Who are you?" "I'm here to kill people," Gu Nan replied. If you want to read some light novels, go to Apex Novel website. Chapter 239. Wulin Chinese Network. transmigrating through the sky to become an evil god. Latest chapter. Deep Sea King had been very annoyed lately. After fighting with Gu Nan, he hid in another place. Before confirming that Gu Nan was dead or that he would not appear for a long time, he decided not to come back. For Break World people, it was not strange for them to not return for a few decades. He knew what was going on in the galaxy world, but his position was not something an ordinary world breaker could compare to. He had a lot of resources. Why would he need to make money from a war? For someone like him, he wanted to avoid the chaos of war. He wanted to bury his head like an ostrich. After everything was settled, he would come out and be the Duke of Peace and Happiness. But he did not know why these days, no matter if it was the Blood Carrier Alliance or his Deep Sea God Palace, there were many problems. It was not a big problem, but it had accumulated a lot. He had to come back and deal with it himself. He could not rely on a clone to control it. Even if he was a Break World person, he could not escape the feeling that he was lucky. That Gu Nan had not come to cause trouble for him for a long time. And he was being chased by Shanghai Pavilion. He did not have time to care about this. The God Palace and the Alliance's matters were trivial. That person did not have the ability to control things to this extent. Plus, when Deep Sea King started to find excuses for himself, he had already made a decision. So, he came back, and at the same time, he stepped onto the road to death. Flower Jade Planet Chamber of Commerce will deal with it this way. If anyone else has an opinion, then let them have no opinion. Deep Sea King sat in his high position and calmly gave orders. He did not notice anything strange. But the next moment, there was a strange movement at the God Palace's door. It made his face change. The World Breaker had a lot of experience. He almost instinctively wanted to rip open space, but the enemy was faster than he could have imagined. An ordinary fist pierced through the air. The strange light on the fist broke through all the defenses of the King of the Deep Sea and landed heavily on his chest. What about Deep Sea King? In the face of such an attack, the expert who had once chased Gu Nan like a dog did not even have the chance to react. His chest quickly caved in. The King of the Deep Sea looked good. He was wearing a navy uniform and even armor. However, in front of Gu Nan's fists, the outcome would be the same with or without the armor. Boom! The King of the Deep Sea was blasted to the ground. His chest caved in as if he had been hit by a meteorite. Do you know about godhood? Gu Nan stood in front of the King of the Deep Sea and asked calmly as if he was asking, "Have you eaten today?" The King of the Deep Sea was at a loss, but he reacted quickly. This might be his only chance of survival. I know, boom! Another punch landed on his head, directly exploding his entire head. Then Gu Nan shook his head lightly and said, "You're too slow." If he answered slowly, it meant that he had thought about it. If he had thought about it, then he must have made it up. That was Gu Nan's answer to NPCs. It was the same judgment he always had. When Gu Nan killed the King of the Deep Sea, a round of applause came from the side. It was the only leader of Shanghai Pavilion, Yu-Jio. It's really shocking. I didn't expect you to improve so quickly even at this realm. Yu-Jio looked at Gu Nan with some surprise in his eyes. He was one of the first people to notice Gu Nan. He knew how much he had improved. Before, he thought he had paid too much attention to Gu Nan. That was from the perspective of the entire galaxy war. After all, to people of that level, no matter how strong a world breaker was, it was nothing. The person behind Shang Rong and the others wanted them to kill Gu Nan. That was strange. After seeing Gu Nan improve, Yu-Jio had to admit that it made sense to kill him as soon as possible. If he was allowed to continue developing, it would not be long before killing him was beyond his ability. What's the matter? Gu Nan asked casually as he looked at Yu-Jio strangely. He was not afraid of Yu-Jio anymore. He was not in a hurry to take revenge. Even an idiot would know that the one in front of him could not be his real body. No curse master would be stupid enough to show his real body to others. Yu-Jio sighed regretfully. It is a pity that too many people have noticed your talent. As soon as he finished speaking, Yujio's figure had already drifted away with the wind. What was approaching him was an inexplicable power of law. Gu Nan knew that this was the effect of the curse power. But this time, it was not a damage increase. It was a weakness. After all, Yujio was one of the leaders of Shanghai Pavilion. He was the top world breaker in the world. His rule power was not easy to bear. Weakness landed on Gu Nan. Gu Nan felt that his life force was rapidly draining away. He seemed to have aged a few decades. He could not muster up any strength. Fortunately, his sin value had a breakthrough. His body of evil god was strengthened. Otherwise, the situation would be more serious. Gu Nan looked at everything coldly. Deity Descends was already in his hand, but he was not in a hurry to use it. Yujio used weakness to weaken himself. This meant that he definitely had helpers. Although the opening was good, he still had to find his opponent. Shang Rong had seen the strength of Gu Nan's body. She was not stupid enough to die. Instead, she hid far away. She raised her hand and waved a light blade. She quickly approached Gu Nan. If one looked carefully, they would find that the light blade looked simple. However, it was very unique. The energy inside it was not stable. Instead, it was circulating all over. Every part of it was much stronger than before. This was Shang Rong's rule, the rule of commerce. Are you not going to make a move? Shang Rong looked at her side. Gu Nian had naturally rushed over. However, she did not seem to be in a hurry to make a move. We just need to hold him back, Gu Nian said softly. Don't forget, our goal is the immortal demon world. Shang Rong's eyes flickered. Although that is the case, we cannot let him go if we can kill him. It might not be that simple. As if to verify Gu Nian's words, thousands of Buddhas rose from the surroundings. They knocked on the wooden fish in front of them. Countless chanting surrounded Gu Nan and the others. It was not strange that the young girl, No Return, wanted to make a move. However, Shang Rong could not help but frown. He felt that something was wrong. In the next moment, he suddenly understood. Not good. Her goal is, bastard. Yujio's flustered and exasperated voice could be heard. His sorry figure appeared in midair. Countless Buddhist chants condensed and surrounded him. At the same time, the weakness he cast on Gu Nan disappeared without a trace. Gu Nan's expression did not change at all. He allowed the light blades to slash his body. A large wound appeared on his waist. However, he did not seem to feel anything. His gaze swept past Shang Rong and Gu Nian. In the end, it landed on the young girl, No Return, who was gradually revealing herself and standing opposite Yujio. Is this what you mean by attacking Shanghai Pavilion? Gu Nan recalled what the young girl, No Return, said when he returned from the hero world. Yes. The young girl, No Return, still had a calm and indifferent expression. However, there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. You seem to know which side I am on? In No Return's eyes, the fact that Gu Nan stood there so calmly meant that he was certain that she would attack Yujio. Naturally, he had also calculated her side. However, Gu Nan only smiled. He flipped his hand and opened the Heavenly God rule. I don't really care about that. If you want to read some light novels, go to Chapter 240. Gu Nan indeed didn't expect No Return to act. He didn't even know she was here, so how could he have guessed? But for Gu Nan, there was no need to doubt No Return's alignment. She had met Shadow Song before, so this alone was enough to prove that she and Zhuozhuo opposed each other. Even Shanghai Pavilion has been instigated by Zhuozhuo. Gu Nan looked at Shang Rong and Gu Nian, and immediately understood what had happened. Gu Nian had died in the immortal demon world, but now he had come back to life. Besides Zhuozhuo, who else could do this? Gu Nan's cold gaze swept over the two, and his body began to emit a faint golden light, which gradually became denser. On the immortal demon world side, Yen Xiaoxiao had already sent a warning. So Zhuozhuo's goal was still the immortal demon world? Be careful. Gu Nian's attention had never left Gu Nan. Seeing this, he immediately said, "I'll deal with him." Shang Rong calmly nodded. Of course he wouldn't look down on Gu Nan, but he also wouldn't be overly afraid of him. After all, he was also Zhuozhuo's subordinate. Wait, what is this? Before Shang Rong could finish his thought, he saw a scene that made him dumbfounded. He saw the golden light that was slowly emitting from Gu Nan's body suddenly brighten and then retract. Gu Nan's entire body expanded, and his entire body glowed with a golden light. Right now, Gu Nan was more than 5 meters tall. Originally, he only had a somewhat sturdy body, but now he had become a muscular man. His shirt had completely burst open, revealing his sturdy chest. But this wasn't the reason why Shang Rong was shocked. What he was shocked about was the terrifying might that the other party could create with just a wave of his hand. Gu Nan was slowly walking forward. He walked on the void, and with every step he took, the space would suddenly shatter, bursting with a dazzling golden light. The entire Shanghai pavilion was filled with this endless golden light. The thousands of Buddhas that were originally floating in the surroundings were completely suppressed, and more than half of them had already dissipated in the wind. The aura coming from Gu Nan was too majestic. He was like a scorching sun. Just the power that he emitted was enough to destroy the Buddhas. The young girl, No Return, stared blankly at this scene, and could only curl her lips speechlessly. The Buddhist kingdom in a palm that she had painstakingly set up had failed before it could be put to use. Yu Jiu, who was forced to reveal his true body by Wu Gui, sank into deep despair. The reason was simple. Gu Nan's first target was him. Gu Nan's footsteps seemed slow, but he was actually fast. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Yu Jiu. His golden arm directly smashed down on Yu Jiu's head. Why me? Yu Jiu couldn't figure it out. Shang Rong and Shang Rong were clearly here to kill him. He was just helping them. Why was he their first target? Was it because he had offended him? The space around Yu Jiu was completely broken. He could not break space to escape. He was in a desperate situation, so he finally showed the courage of the Shanghai Pavilion leader. If he could not escape, then he would fight to the death. Even if he had to fight to the death pang. Yu Jiu was so angry in his heart. Countless curse rules were thrown at Gu Nan's body. He thought he could at least block his opponent's rules, but none of them worked. Gu Nan's palm came down and smashed Yu Jiu's head. Gu Nan, who had become a sky god, could kill world destroyers like he was killing chickens. Yu Jiu was the Shanghai Pavilion leader, the top world destroyer, but he ended up the same as Deep Sea King. As for the curse power that Yu Jiu used before he died, they all landed on Gu Nan's body. Weak, old, confused, tired. All the curses that landed on an ordinary world destroyer were enough to make them lose 90% of their fighting power. But Gu Nan took them all. The rules landed on Sky God's body, but they did not even create a splash. They disappeared without a trace. God was just a creature with a higher life level than ordinary people. Sky God was a real God. He was not affected by the rules of the mortal world. From a certain perspective, this was the true law-breaking. If you wanted to stop Sky God descends, you had to use physical attacks or create an environment that was not suitable for Sky God to fight. However, neither of these two were easy to achieve. After killing Yu Jiu with a single palm strike, Gu Nan looked at Gu Nianji and Yu Jiu again. Yan Xiaoxiao's call was getting stronger. He knew something had happened in the fairy demon world, but he also knew he had to get rid of the people there first. His Sky God descend state could not be maintained for long. If he did not use the big skill to kill the enemy, would he have to wait for the big skill to wear off and the enemy to kill him? So, Gu Nan did not waste any time. He turned into a gold line and went straight for Shang Rong. Shang Rong looked at the gold shadow that was flying fast. The space along the way was broken into pieces. He felt his scalp go numb. His head was about to explode. If Zhuo was not so powerful in his heart, he would have cursed. You want me to stop an opponent like that from breaking through space? I'll thank the heavens if I can run away with my life. But Shang Rong was not Yu Jiu. Shang Rong had been forced to reveal his real body by young lady Wu Gui. Even if Shang Rong came with his real body, there was still room for him to turn back. Shang Rong didn't care about the demeanor of one of the 5 attainment monuments. She casually shot out a light blade before turning and running without hesitation. But how could his speed compare to Sky God Descends? A heaviness that felt like the sky was collapsing appeared behind Shang Rong. Shang Rong turned back in despair. He saw that Gu Nan had already arrived. The glory that could cause considerable damage previously could not even scratch his opponent's skin. Facing this scene, Shang Rong's hopeless heart suddenly had a hint of understanding. Then 2 words popped out: Sky God. His opponent's ability was as unparalleled as a sky god. Any person or thing that tried to block the sky god would be crushed into pieces without hesitation. Just as Shang Rong expected, Gu Nan's fist suddenly landed. His target was Shang Rong's head. However, the moment his fist touched Shang Rong, a voice that seemed to carry some kind of magic rang out again. Life and death, death and life. The black and white space of the seal of life and death did not land on Gu Nan. Instead, Shang Rong experienced it. He felt his vision turn black and then bright. He did not die in Gu Nan's hands. That punch seemed to have disappeared, or perhaps he had already died once and was resurrected. When he heard Gu Nan's strange voice, Shang Rong believed that it was the latter. Before he could wake up from the joy of escaping death, he realized that Gu Nan had disappeared again. This time, Shang Rong did not need to think to know what had happened. Not good. This is a diversion. He turned to look at Gu Nan, but it was too late. On the other side, Gu Nan felt the power coming from above his head. He could not help but reveal a trace of helplessness. You even know about resurrection? Chapter 241. Gu Nan's battle strategy had always been clear. Then, by concealing his true goal, he would make the enemy make the wrong judgment, and finally, he would die step by step. Knowing that something had happened to the immortal demon world, Gu Nan did not rush to save them. This was to reduce the enemy's strength as much as possible. Of course, Yu Jiu had to be the first to kill, because his curse master profession was far more troublesome to Gu Nan than other opponents of the same rank. Therefore, when Gu Nan completed his transformation, he attacked immediately. Even Gu Nan did not have time to save him. As for the remaining 2 opponents, it was much easier to kill first. There was no need to consider when facing an opponent with the 4th rank mapping law. If he killed Shang Rong first, Gu Nan would not hesitate to resurrect her. The relativity between life and death. At the 3rd rank, only Gu Nan could resurrect himself, but now it could fall on others. An experienced player like Gu Nan, of course, knew that mapping meant everything is relative. Life and death, creation and destruction, time and space, force and reaction. The first thing that Gu Nan found might be life and death. But mapping was not really invincible. Although it could be used on Shang Rong, it also had its own weakness, which was delay. The higher the level of the mapping power, the more time it needed to prepare. In other words, this was a law that could not withstand assassination. It was also because of this that Gu Nan used the diversion strategy to trick Gu Nan into using the seal of life and death, and then suddenly change the target. I'm more familiar with mapping than you are. As the voice rang out, the golden fist came crashing down. However, Gu Nianji made an unbelievable move just a moment ago. She suddenly hit her own temple with her palm, and the originally beating brain was instantly pierced. She committed suicide. Shang Rong looked at this scene in shock, not understanding the meaning of Gu Nian's move. Was she going to commit suicide in order to not die in the hands of the opponent? Gu Nan retracted his hand and muttered, "Seeking life and death? Smart NPCs are troublesome." Even with Gu Nan's experience, he had to admit that Gu Nian's suicide was the best choice. As long as she did not have to bear Gu Nan's extremely lofty heavenly god law, she would at least have a chance to resurrect herself, even if she had to pay a huge price. If he was killed by an Empyrean god, then even projection would be powerless. Without Gu Nian and Shang Rong not seizing the opportunity to escape, there was only one outcome left. As Gu Nan, who was in his heavenly god state, punched out, this peak expert that was renowned throughout the myriad heavens and was known as one of the 5 degrees monument instantly turned into dust. In the next instant, Gu Nan tore open the void and descended into the immortal demon world. In the fairy demon world, 2 world breakers arrived. One of them was Shang Rong's good friend, the exceptional tablet Qin Fengye of the 5 attainment tablets. She was a beautiful woman that gave off a sinister feeling. The other one was not even a human. It was a strange creature with a snake's head, a human torso, and a lizard's lower body. For Zhuo Zhuo, who was in the outer world, it was not strange for her to have subordinates like that. The snake-headed man was called Bailey Tua. He was enjoying the smell of the fairy demon world. A living person, the smell of a living person. Bailey Tua usually lived in a place where no one lived. He was only released when he was on a mission. Now, he was very fierce. If you get the origin, you can eat any living person you want, Qin Fengye coldly said. It made Bailey Tua come back to his senses. You said it. Bailey Tua stuck out his tongue that was like a tongue and licked his lip. Qin Fengye ignored him. She immediately flew forward. She knew the origin of this world was in front of her. She did not need to look for it. The fairy demon world was Zhuo Zhuo's place. If it was not for the fact that he could not leave, he would not have needed to arrange it. Thinking about Zhuo Zhuo's situation, Qin Fengye's eyes turned cold. After all, tens of thousands of years ago, this was the woman who had taken the galaxy world from Mr. She was not simple. If it was not for that person's unexpected performance, they would not have needed the fairy demon world's origin. Qin Fengye stepped into a manor with a single step. The thoughts in his mind were all gone, and his figure went straight in a certain direction. Standing here, she could even clearly sense where the origin source was. As long as she could obtain this origin source, her master would be able to easily suppress that. Who is this? Qin Fengye coldly looked at the woman who had suddenly appeared. He quietly asked, "Who are you?" In their information, the fairy demon world did not have a second break world, but the person in front of them had a rule presence. She was a break world class. Lan Si. The woman's cold voice sounded. It was Lan Si, who had been in seclusion for a decade. Gu Nan had been in purple sky for a few months. A few years had passed in the fairy demon world. Lan Si had finally come out. She had been class 4. Her body and god personality had combined. Why are you wasting time with her? Kill her! Bailey Tua came from behind. His gloomy voice followed him. He went straight for Lan Si. However, Lan Si was faster than him. She raised her hand and waved, and a blue light instantly enveloped Bailey Tua. Bailey Tua was shocked. He tried to use his rule to break the enemy's encirclement, but the blue light was like the toughest cloth. He could not break it. In the next moment, he felt suffocated. He realized what the blue light was. Heavy water. It was extremely heavy water. Every drop of water was like a meteor. They gathered together and covered the surface of his body. What kind of feeling was that? Bailey Tua now knew. His whole body felt like it was being buried alive. He was buried in the center of the earth. Luckily, there were 2 of us. Bailey Tua turned his head. He saw Qin Fengye running away. Stall her. I am going to steal the origin. Qin Fengye's voice was quicker than Bailey Tuo's. His actions were the same. He disappeared. Bailey Tuo's heart was filled with thousands of thoughts. At this moment, he wanted to escape and kill his teammate Qin Fengye. Luckily, Lan Si was distracted by Qin Fengye's actions. Bailey Tua was not crushed to death. Lan Si turned around anxiously. She realized that the other party's goal was to steal something. Now that Gu Nan was not here, she was responsible for stopping him. Qin Fengye's thoughts were much simpler. What did Bailey Tuo's life have to do with her? As long as she obtained the immortal demon world's origin, even if she sacrificed Bailey Tuo, she would be the one to be rewarded in front of Lady Zhua Zhua. In front, it was right in front. The originally blue origin was now corroded by the shadow power. It was already in front of Qin Fengye. But Qin Fengye was also famous in the heavenly world. Even at the last moment, she did not relax. She was on guard against any traps that the enemy might have left. Even the action of seizing the origin was quick and careful. She even used the rule power to wrap her right hand. Then, she reached out to grab it. Even if there was a trap, even if she had to cripple her hand, she had to get the origin. Qin Fengye made up her mind. She did not hesitate to reach out. Success. She grabbed the origin. But at this moment, an inexplicable power suddenly appeared in the sky. It made Qin Fengye feel like the sky was collapsing. She looked up subconsciously, and a huge golden palm suddenly fell down, directly smashing her into minced meat. Chapter 242. Gu Nan's body was more than 5 meters tall. He was like a small giant. His body appeared in the sky. He came next to Qin Fengye's body. Qin Fengye was a top-break world elite, but she was facing Gu Nan in Sky God mode. She could not fight back. Sky God descent gave Gu Nan not only a rule resistance, but it also strengthened his speed and power. Gu Nan, who was in Sky God mode, had his body power reach a limit. Under the effect of the God nature, his body could break space. Ordinary people could not tolerate this. This was Sky God. Gu Nan picked up Qin Fengye like he was picking up a chicken. He tossed her aside and put his hand into the original. No! This angry roar came from Bailey Tuo. The snake-head man took advantage of Lan Si's distraction to find a chance to escape. But before he could be happy, he saw something like this. He did not know who Gu Nan was, but he knew what Gu Nan was doing. He was going to destroy the original. Yes, no matter if it was symbolic or real, it was the original of the fairy demon world. Gu Nan was going to destroy it. The gold hand stabbed into the light ball of the original. The original was invisible, but it made a cracking sound. In the past, Gu Nan needed to study and analyze to figure out what the original was. Now, he did not need to. That was because the evil god Hall told him the original was a god fire. It was something he was familiar with. Gu Nan did not know how to deal with the original, but the god fire was much clearer. Gu Nan's hand stirred gently, and the origin that had tormented him for a long time suddenly turned from black to blue, then back to black again, and finally separated into black and blue. The cracking sound in space was getting louder. The original was about to break. A wind blew past. Bailey Tuo saw his chance. He flashed and appeared behind Gu Nan. He slashed at the back of his neck. Bailey Tuo was mad, but he was a top-break world elite. He had the best grasp of the situation. This golden guy killed Qin Fengye as soon as he appeared, and then he was busy destroying the source. What did this mean? The other party did not have much time left, and destroying the source was what he needed to do the most right now. Of course, he had to interfere with the other party. In Bailey Tuo's mediocre mind, he didn't even care about his own safety. All he could think of now was to kill a living person. Food. His saber fell without any hindrance and landed heavily on Gu Nan's neck. Bailey Tuo's face revealed some joy, but in the next moment, his expression changed drastically. Clang! Bailey Tuo's saber slashed down on Gu Nan's body, but Gu Nan did not move at all. Even his golden skin was not damaged at all. Instead, the laws on the saber disappeared, and the saber itself broke apart. This is... Bailey Tuo seemed to have realized something. His eyelids twitched, but it was too late for him to pull himself away. Gu Nan coldly turned his body. His hand, which was still in the source, did not move. His other hand swung and slapped Bailey Tuo's face. The world breaker was not even able to turn his head. His entire head was sent flying. No, it was more accurate to say that even the space where his head was shattered by Gu Nan's slap. Bailey Tuo's body slowly fell. There was still a black hole where his head should have been. It was like someone had taken a piece out of it. It was very weird. Gu Nan's cold eyes turned back. The fairy demon world source was now very clear. The left side was blue and the right side was black. It represented the part left by Zhuozhuo and the part that Gu Nan had gone into. Under the control of Gu Nan's sky god body, the two parts started to separate. The source was going to be split in half. That was Gu Nan's goal. He wanted to break the fairy demon world source. He wanted to destroy the part that belonged to Zhuozhuo and leave only his own. With his current understanding of the origin and the powerful strength of the heavenly god's body, it was not impossible for him to do so. But Gu Nan quickly looked regretful. He realized he could not achieve his goal. The reason was simple: he did not have enough time. Gu Nan was not familiar with the source, but he was very familiar with the god fire. That was especially true of the fairy demon world, which had a master. The source was a combination of the god fire. If he broke the paper window, Gu Nan would only need to glance at it. He knew it would take him at least a day to completely separate the source. How could his avatar state be maintained for so long? Right now, Gu Nan could feel his power fading. The transformation was coming to an end. Gu Nan had no choice but to restrain the regret in his heart and make a shocking decision. He suddenly punched out fiercely and blasted it directly at the source. "Master?" Yan Xiaoxiao appeared from the side. She looked at Gu Nan in shock. She had been hiding at the side. She was the last line of defense. If not for Gu Nan's appearance, she might have been the one to stop Qin Fengye. But it was also because of this that Yan Xiaoxiao could not understand Gu Nan's actions. This punch of his was really going to destroy the origin. Why? He tried so hard to protect the source, and then he wanted to destroy it himself? And didn't Master know that once the source was destroyed, the world would collapse? Yan Xiaoxiao had almost fused with a human. She was the one who controlled the source. She knew the importance of the source. However, Gu Nan did not hesitate at all. He threw a heavy punch, and the blue and black origin finally began to disperse completely. Tsk, how cruel! As the source dissipated, a shadow gradually appeared in front of Gu Nan. In order to prevent me from taking back the source, you would rather destroy this world? The shadow looked at Gu Nan calmly and said. The left and right sides of the shadow were completely different. On the left side was a crazy girl, and on the right side was a gentle and kind young man. This was Zhuozhuo's shadow. After many years, Gu Nan finally met him again. This was the superstar master that Gu Nan met through a private dungeon when he was at the 3rd rank. Now that he was facing Zhuozhuo, Gu Nan was not afraid. Firstly, he had the body of a sky god. His strength was not the same as before. Secondly, the shadow in front of him was just a remnant soul that Zhuozhuo left in the immortal demon world. If Zhuozhuo could come out, even if it was just a clone, it would be enough to snatch the source. Why would there be so much trouble? I might be able to protect the world, but I can't leave the source for you. Gu Nan smiled. Besides, you should worry about yourself first. Zhuozhuo's expression was still calm. Even the girl's face did not change. It's that woman's turn in the next round, right? Gu Nan chuckled and said, I heard you have an elder sister? Chapter 243. The world was shattering, and the heavens and earth were collapsing. The scene of Gu Nan seizing the source was repeating even more violently now, and the sky even began to rain meteorites. Yan Xiaoxiao's eyes were red as she watched this, and her heart was bleeding. She had spent more than 10 years of painstaking effort to establish 2 major alliances and 50 city-state. In this doomsday-like scene, it would be lucky to preserve even a tenth of them. and if this situation continued, in less than an hour, the entire world would completely collapse, and all things would perish. Zhua's shadow had long since disappeared. Of course, she couldn't give Gu Nan any answer, and Gu Nan didn't just want to disgust her. He also wanted to divert Zhua's attention. Zhua's current situation was actually very easy to guess. It was nothing more than the most critical moment of the confrontation, and discovering that the battle that should have been in the bag still needed some help. As a result, some things that she originally didn't care about were now in demand. After all, the immortal demon world was Zhua's dojo. Although he needed the source, would there be other things left behind? Gu Nan didn't hesitate to destroy his future divine kingdom and destroy the source in order to completely dispel Zhua's covetous heart. In this situation, using Shadow Song's existence to divert the opponent's attention was naturally the best choice. As for whether revealing this information would cause Red's plan to fail, what did her life and death have to do with Gu Nan? Gu Nan couldn't wait for these two to fight to the death, so that he would have space to grow. The golden light on Gu Nan's body finally began to fade rapidly, and his body and strength also returned to normal. This was also the reason why Gu Nan was in a hurry to destroy the source. After exiting the Empyrean state, he couldn't destroy it even if he wanted to. The world's source wasn't a glass ball that anyone could break at will. Teacher, the world. Is there really a chance to save it? Yan Xiaoxiao naturally heard Gu Nan's words before, and asked a little anxiously. She had witnessed Gu Nan's power fading with her own eyes. If it was her teacher just now, it might have been possible, but now, of course, Gu Nan said without hesitation. Of course. I can't help it. The corner of Yan Xiaoxiao's mouth twitched. If it wasn't for the fact that the teacher in front of her was still her respected teacher, she really wanted to punch him in the face. The sky was still raining meteors. We have to rely on her. Gu Nan was not joking. He seriously pointed to the side, where Lan Si was standing. Lan Si was shocked. She didn't expect that this kind of mission to save the world would fall on her. When Yan Xiaoxiao saw her dumbfounded expression, she was even more convinced that Gu Nan was talking nonsense. However, before she could ask again, Gu Nan spoke again. You started fusing with the divine spark from the 3rd rank. Now that you've broken through to the 4th rank, the divine spark will take the initiative to move closer to you, and divinity will also begin to form. Gu Nan spoke frankly with assurance. Inheriting a divine spark was not uncommon in the game. There weren't many that players could interfere with, but there were many NPC natives who obtained divine sparks by chance. Therefore, Gu Nan was quite familiar with the growth process of these gods. At the 3rd rank, they were still mortals. At the 4th rank, they began to transform into God. The first strand of divinity was born in the divine spark, and the power of the word God was truly born. The reason why Lan Si could so easily suppress Bailey Tua was also related to the divine spark. Otherwise, she, who had just advanced to the 4th rank, would not be able to do this. Lan Si did not understand what Gu Nan was talking about. She was still confused. You can mend the sky at the 4th rank. Gu Nan looked exasperated. Before Lorenza became a god, she used to mend the sky. Don't tell me you don't know about that? Mend what? Oh, it should be called repairing the world stone. Gu Nan used the language of the game, and Lan Si finally understood what he was talking about. In the world of gods, people believed that the core of the world was a world stone. Everything in the world was evolved from the world stone. Naturally, the worldview in the game was the same. The god that Lan Si used to worship, the flowering goddess Lorenza, had once participated in repairing the world stone when she was a demigod. Of course, the players would not use a tongue twister like repairing the world stone. They used the very visual mend the sky, so Gu Nan said it casually. Lan Si had grown up in the flowering goddess kingdom, so she was very familiar with the past deeds of the mother goddess. However, she had only heard about it. She was not at all familiar with the process. It's very simple. This was the time for the experienced Gu Nan to give her some pointers. The divine power of water naturally has the law of creation. If you use the divine power to repair the holes in this world, the fire seed might be born again. Fire seed was also a special term in the game. It referred to the unlit divine fire, which was the natural origin of this world. This time, Lan Si understood. As long as she continued to repair this world, the origin that Gu Nan had shattered could be reborn. This process sounded simple, but the difficulty lay in the fact that no one else had the ability to repair the world. Only Lan Si's divine power of water could. Yan Xiaoxiao only understood half of it, but she was the most anxious of them all. She immediately said, "Should we try?" "Let's try." Above the endless void, in the palace that seemed to stand eternally in the starry sky, two figures were calmly facing each other. On one side was the child-sized Zuozua, half boy and half girl. On the other side was a woman covered in red makeup. If Gu Nan was here, he would definitely recognize her. This was the woman who told him where Shadow Song was and wanted him to protect her. She called herself Red. At this moment, Red sat quietly on the throne while Zuozua stood motionlessly in front of her. In the silent palace, something seemed to float into it. Zuozua slowly opened her eyes. "A little friend heard that I have an older sister. Perhaps this is good news?" Good news that came late. Red didn't even bother to lift her eyelids. She said unhurriedly. Zuozua coldly stared at her. The sinister face of the girl on the left was becoming colder and colder. He had never underestimated this opponent of his from 10,000 years ago. After all, it was she who pushed him into the abyss at the moment when he was at his most proud. Then she easily obtained this world-dividing world, as if she was taking something out of her pocket. In the immortal demon world, it was she who took away one of the twins that he had set up in advance, making it impossible for him to obtain the complete origin. Now, even if he wanted to obtain an incomplete one, it was already impossible. And now, his older sister, who should have died tens of thousands of years ago, was actually still alive. The coldness in Zuozua's eyes deepened. He even began to suspect that the little guy with the aura of the immortal demon world was also arranged by the other party? All the chess pieces were arranged, just waiting for him to take the bait? That little guy is also one of your people? Chapter 244. Gu Nan still didn't know that a certain existence that he had only met a few times had already identified him as a hedgehog. Of course, even if he knew, he probably wouldn't care, because he couldn't wait to become a hedgehog, so that no one would dare to covet him. But at the same time, Gu Nan wanted to have thoughts about others. Simply put, only I can bully others, others can't bully me, let alone bully me, they can't even hinder me. Time passed day by day. The matter of the star world was temporarily put aside by Gu Nan. He concentrated on staying in the immortal demon world, commanding Lan Si to carry out the Mending the Heavens operation. Lan Si breaking through to the 4th rank still brought some benefits to Gu Nan. Not only did she have the ability to Mending the Heavens at the 4th rank, but also fused with the Godhead, causing Gu Nan's sin value to soar. 1960 points, this was the current number of Gu Nan's sin value. Lan Si's breakthrough increased by about 200 points of sin value. Adding up, this Godhead contributed nearly 1,000 points of sin value, and could be considered to have successfully completed its mission. And Lan Si was also working hard to complete her mission. As a half-god emissary of Gu Nan, she naturally had to devote her energy to the divine nation. Originally, when she was in seclusion, the complicated affairs of the divine nation were all handed over to Yan Xiaoxiao, and now it was her turn to make up for it. The repair work of the immortal demon world was progressing bit by bit, with Gu Nan's precise command, coupled with the miraculous effect of the water divine power, they really persevered. The hole in the sky was filled piece by piece, the cracks in the space were also healing, and Yan Xiaoxiao had already organized the people to rebuild their homes. Regrettably, as Yen Xiaoxiao had predicted, in this natural disaster, more than half of the people of the immortal demon world died, and not even 10% survived. This is nothing. Gu Nan very calmly waved his hand. Male and female pair, forced birth. The human birth cycle is 1 year, and the growth cycle is only 15 to 20 years. We can afford to wait. The time flow of the immortal demon world was 10 times faster than the outside world. Of course they could afford to wait. However, the words forced production that Gu Nan spoke of was enough to shock everyone. Even Yen Xiaoxiao, who already knew Gu Nan's way of doing things, couldn't help but be shocked. No ruler would treat his people like this. This was not ruling, this was breeding. Gu Nan was training people like animals. When he needed people, he would choose the method of forced matching, not considering the individual's wishes at all. Yen Xiaoxiao was silent, as if she was still digesting the meaning of Gu Nan's words, but Gu Nan didn't care at all. He really had nothing to lament about. All the players in the game did the same thing. In fact, after the Divine Kingdom stabilized, the players would set a limit on the lifespan of the population. Ordinary people beyond a certain age would be executed. If the resources provided to the elderly were used to nurture the young and strong, they would be able to obtain a higher energy yield. Technology, cultivation methods, basic resources, these can all be provided by us. Gu Nan said, the people only need to cultivate. Cultivation is their only goal in life. Cultivation will bring them a longer lifespan, more resources, and the power to dominate others. Low-level people will be dominated in exchange for resources to reach a higher level. This will be the basic rule of the Divine Kingdom. Gu Nan tried his best to describe the world he envisioned with the simplest words he could. It would be a world that was efficient enough, where everyone pursued cultivation. No one would enjoy themselves, and no one would have the time to relax. Vanity, ambition, love, and hatred would all become their motivation to move forward. Why create such a world? Yen Xiaoxiao asked blankly. She really couldn't understand. What was the point of such a monotonous and boring world? I need it, Gu Nan said confidently. The overall strength of the Divine Kingdom determined the strength of his future strength. This reason was sufficient. Because Gu Nan needed it, he wanted to control a part of the world and raise all the people inside like animals. He even wanted to brainwash them and make it their goal to cultivate to a higher level for the rest of their lives. Yen Xiaoxiao wasn't a modern person who accepted the idea of everyone is equal, but she still felt a little awkward. Seeing her hesitation, Gu Nan simply turned to Lan Si and said, when the Divine Kingdom's repair work is completed, you can also participate in the cultivation of the people. Gu Nan didn't say that Lan Si would directly take over. Her management ability wasn't enough to take charge. But as long as Lan Si participated, Yen Xiaoxiao had no choice but to make up her mind. Presumably, she didn't have any intention of falling out with Gu Nan. Compared to Yen Xiaoxiao's hesitation, Lan Si was much more straightforward. She directly replied, okay. When Gu Nan left the immortal and demon world, more than a month had passed outside. In other words, he stayed in the immortal and demon world for a full year. This was something that couldn't be helped. The direct destruction of the origin was not a joke. If not for Gu Nan watching, even Lan Si and Yen Xiaoxiao would be in danger. Gu Nan conveniently went to the star world. The current star world was even more chaotic than before. The flames of war had already begun to ignite in the major star fields. This was obviously Zhuo's was doing. He was trying to use this method to weaken Red's power. The Star Lords were the same as the gods that Gu Nan knew. They used the power of the people in the star world to strengthen the laws they could control. Of course, it was not impossible to rely on oneself. But the power of one person couldn't be compared to the power of a world, right? The young girl, No Return, had also disappeared. But Gu Nan didn't have the time to look for her. Anyway, she couldn't find the coordinates of the immortal and demon world. Her position had nothing to do with Gu Nan. After thinking for a moment, Gu Nan's figure quickly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in his residence in the purple sieve heaven. It had to be said that Gu Nan was getting more and more familiar with the manipulation of tearing the void. He could even control his precise landing point to not deviate more than a meter. Continue to earn spirit stones. I need to rush to 2,500 sin points as soon as possible and advance to the 5th level. Gu Nan didn't need to think too much. He quickly determined his next goal. He had a hunch that the active world's origin that he exchanged for spirit stones might not be useful after he reached the 5th level. This time, there was no need for others to explain. Gu Nan himself was very clear about the principle. Other Star Lords could absorb the origin to strengthen themselves and the Star World. But Gu Nan's God Kingdom was different. In the game, the most suitable way to advance after the first-class advancement was to kill a god. Searching for the world of gods needs to be put on the agenda. Gu Nan knew better than anyone else that he would eventually head to the Pantheon world. Only the gods there were the best prey for him. Chapter 245. Purple Sky was a very open plain, but it was also a society with a strict hierarchy. So, when Gu Nan bought a house, people of this level came and went. Normally, there were very few conflicts. He did not expect to encounter something like this when he came back. "Master." The maid ran over in a panic. She quickly reported, "Outside, there are a few big shots searching." Gu Nan frowned slightly and waved his hand to get the maid to leave before he walked outside. Just as the maid had said, there was a small team carefully searching outside. Although they were worried about the identity of the people who lived there, they did not do too much. Still, they made a lot of noise. Plus, the loud noise did not seem like it was caused by a search. "What is going on?" Gu Nan asked Luowan. Gu Nan's neighbor was not like him. Luowan lived in Purple Sky all year round. He spent most of his time at home doing shameless things. Of course, he was shocked. Looking at Luowan's face, it seemed he had been interrupted while doing something. "It's the 7-Star Alliance," Luowan said quietly. "They said they were looking for a woman who stole something. I don't know if it's true or not." Gu Nan had been in Purple Sky for a long time, so he knew what the 7-Star Alliance was. The Astral Gate was an open organization. They recruited people from all planes, but that did not mean they were in a state of disunity. In fact, in the Astral Gate there were core and periphery organizations. Only loyal members could join the core organization. People like Gu Nan could only stay on the periphery. There were many organizations inside the Astral Gate. There were no less than 100 organizations, big or small. The 7-Star Alliance was one of them, and it was very famous. Gu Nan couldn't help but smile when he heard Luowan. The 7-Star Alliance was not so bored that they would go to the Break World area to search. Luowan's good deed had been interrupted, and he was angry. At this time, the members of the 7-Star Alliance also saw Gu Nan appear. Soon, someone came up to him and asked if he had seen a woman. The attitude of the people from the 7 Stars Alliance was very respectful and professional. Not only did they take out the detailed information of the people they were investigating, but they even had images and photos. Gu Nan glanced at the ordinary-looking woman named Fong Jing and shook his head. He really didn't know this person, but he was also a bit puzzled. With such detailed information, she still managed to escape. Was it because the 7-Star Alliance was too useless, or was there something strange about this woman? Many Break World people showed up. The 7-Star Alliance people went to ask them, but they were disappointed. None of them were able to provide any valuable information. It wasn't until they retracted their team and left that Luowan said with emotion, "This woman is not simple. If it wasn't for someone's help, I would definitely have kept her." This was a gathering place for Break World people. It was not easy to hide one's whereabouts there. Luowan's eyes lit up as he spoke. Luowan was a very special Break World person. He didn't grow up from a small plane of existence. He was born in Purple Sky, so his personality didn't have much of a murderous nature. He was crazy about all kinds of women, but he wasn't a heartless person. He treated every woman with sincerity. The collection Luowan was talking about was keeping a woman next to him. Then, he would use his long life to accompany her until she died. In the end, he would make her into a permanent specimen. Gu Nan wasn't interested in Luowen's special hobby. He calmly turned around and went back to his room. Even Luowen didn't notice that the moment Gu Nan closed the door, the shadow power had completely surrounded the room. In front of him stood a woman. Gu Nan didn't know this face, but he had seen the image. Plus, he was very familiar with the other's presence. Looks could be changed and names could be faked. Only the special presence of the soul could not be fooled. Gu Nan had been in contact with the other's soul before, so the disguise could not be hidden from him. "Oh, it's you." Gu Nan used shadow power to lock down the area and said, "Last time, you found Star World. This time, you found me. What is the relationship between you and that Uncle Purple Lightning?" Gu Nan's two questions didn't seem to be connected. The only connection was that they were both asking the same question. The person who appeared in front of Gu Nan was the person who had gone to the private instance dungeon with him. She had used her own power to defeat Star Master Purple Will. When Gu Nan returned to Star World, Purple Will had sent a part of her soul to possess Duanmu Yin. She had tried to lead Gu Nan to the Duanmu family's ancestral grave. Gu Nan had reason to believe that her goal was Purple Lightning. Purple Will was not surprised by Gu Nan's question. She had shown herself because she had been prepared for this. Purple Will's face returned to normal. Then, she chose to answer the second question. "Purple Lightning is my son." "Hey!" Gu Nan suddenly clapped his hands. "That's an unexpected answer. Looking at the two of you, I thought you were his daughter." No matter what, the middle-aged Purple Lightning was much more mature than Purple Will. His personality was the same as well. Moreover, the plot of a daughter saving her father seemed more reliable. Purple Will's expression remained cold in the face of Gu Nan's exaggerated statement. "They know you're in the Purple Civ sky, so they sent me to find you. Their location might have already been exposed. Zuazwa's people will come looking for you soon." "Help? Why should I help?" Gu Nan interrupted her before she could finish speaking. Purple Will was taken aback. She hadn't expected Gu Nan's answer to be so straightforward. She said forcefully, "That person in Star World asked you to protect this generation's blood ancestor. You agreed." "Can't I go back on my word?" Gu Nan asked, a strange expression on his face. Players never cared about what they promised. If you wanted them to accept a mission, you had to give them a suitable reward. Of course, in the end, Shadow Song's ability to enter the Starry Sky path was useless to Gu Nan. He could rely on origin crystals to advance to the 5th stage, and his efficiency wouldn't be low. But once he reached the 5th stage, he would be able to enter the inner world. What use would Shadow Song have then? If they were useless, they would discard them. This was how players treated equipment, pets, and NPCs. This was the first time Purple Will had seen someone go back on their word in such a serious manner. She took a deep breath and stared at Gu Nan. "When Zuazwa takes the Star World, do you think you'll get anything out of it?" "There's no harm in that." Gu Nan didn't seem to care. In any case, the origin of the immortal demon world had been destroyed, and the coordinates were scattered to who knew where. Zuazwa wouldn't be able to cause him any trouble. Purple Will was completely helpless against this stubborn fellow. Anger gradually appeared on her face. "Then what do you want in exchange for your help?" "It's very simple," Gu Nan said matter-of-factly. "I just need money. I need 100,000 origin crystals." Purple Will's eyes widened. As if afraid that Gu Nan would go back on his word, she quickly spoke. Chapter 246. 100,000 Spirit Stones. This was what Gu Nan currently needed. Spirit Stones could be exchanged for the same amount of active source. The only thing that mattered was the number of spirit stones. However, as Gu Nan's sin value increased, the benefits of active source gradually decreased. According to Gu Nan's estimation, he needed about 500 points of sin value to reach the 5th stage, which was roughly 100,000 spirit stones. After reaching the 5th stage, Gu Nan suspected that the active source would no longer have any effect on his sin value. Based on the evil god's temple's behavior, it was normal to change the method of obtaining sin value at each stage. Now that Gu Nan looked back, everything seemed particularly clear. The first stage was a normal instance dungeon, the second stage was reincarnation, the third stage was a private instance dungeon obtained from sin events and translation, and the fourth stage was the active source. Although there were intersections, the main body was indeed like this. If it weren't for the influence of a divine spark, Gu Nan might have spent more time in it and realized the changes earlier. However, it didn't matter now. Right now, Gu Nan was only 100,000 spirit stones away from reaching the 5th stage. Therefore, Gu Nan's price for Purple Will was 100,000 spirit stones. Any more was useless, he couldn't spend it. As for accepting Purple Will's employment to help rescue Shadow Song and Purple Lightning, Gu Nan didn't have any psychological resistance. After all, it was a mission, and Purple Will's mission wasn't as troublesome as the Astral Gate. That's settled then, Gu Nan said to Z. Can we pay first before we start working? In your dreams. In a remote little world, Gu Nan and Purple Will appeared in a loft. You really don't want to consider paying first? Gu Nan was still diligently persuading. If I pay first, my strength will increase, and I'll have more confidence in rescuing them. Purple Will was still expressionless. She calmly walked out of the room and said, I'm going to prepare the materials. We'll leave in 3 days. As for Gu Nan's suggestion to pay first, Purple Will chose to completely ignore it. What a pity. Gu Nan shook his head. Paying in advance would allow Gu Nan's strength to increase tremendously. This was true. Once Gu Nan's strength increased tremendously, his chances of rescuing others would increase tremendously. This was also true. Only after paying first would Gu Nan raise his strength and still go to help. Of course, this was just a casual remark. Knowing the player's character, it was normal for them to take the money without doing anything. Some of them even killed NPCs for equipment after taking the money. However, Gu Nan was only joking. He knew that it was impossible for Purple Will to pay him in advance. The reason was very simple. Both sides were the best choice right now, and it was not a pure one-sided market. For some reason, Purple Intent could only look for Gu Nan's help, and it would be difficult for Gu Nan to find another task with a reward of 100,000 source crystals. The purchasing power of origin crystals was very strong, especially for Break World people. Under normal circumstances, a Break World person would not be able to spend a few hundred origin crystals a year. Gu Nan could eat active original like it was candy, but other Break World people could not. Every time they observed it, it would take them a few years to learn it. At the end of the day, Purple Intent was a Star Lord, which was why he could take out 100,000 origin crystals at once. After Purple Will left, Gu Nan calmed down. He started to prepare for this mission. He had to analyze and calculate every mission. That was a habit Gu Nan had developed over the years. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning were not in a good situation. Ever since Zwa learned of Shadow Song's existence, he had been looking for the two of them, but he had not been able to find them. After all, Zwa had just found out, and Shadow Song was in the dark. He had been on guard for a long time. He could not expose himself, but Zwa was someone who could compete with Red for Star World. He had many tricks up his sleeve. Even if he could not find Shadow Song, he could still achieve his goal. He did not need to find Shadow Song. He just needed Shadow Song to die. So, Shadow Song and Purple Lightning were trapped. They were trapped in a dream. Dreamless world. Gu Nan flipped through the information in his hands page by page, but he frowned slightly because this small plane was too special. Mysterious Dream World was a small world at the edge of the sky. Like all the small worlds at the edge, it was between the surface world and the inner world. But Mysterious Dream World was special because it did not have the characteristics of an inner world. It was still a normal world that could not be reset, but it had the characteristics of an inner world. Yes, it was just a world-class plane, but it had the characteristics of an inner world. It was the center of the world. The light balls in the inner world were the core carriers of countless planes in the sky. They were the internal manifestations, so they were called the center of the world. Mysterious Dream World was the same. Here, you can find the manifestation of the dreams of countless worlds and countless living beings. Simply put, all the creatures gathered in this plane in the form of a dream. Gu Nan did not understand the principle behind this, but this did not hinder his current mission, to find Shadow Song and Purple Lightning in the Mysterious Dream World and kill them. As long as he killed the creatures in the Mysterious Dream World, he could destroy their dreams and let them leave. This was the simplest method. But the more troublesome part was that when people were dreaming, their minds were not necessarily clear. In fact, most people would completely lose their ability to judge and act according to their instincts. What was instinct? If you wanted to kill me, I would kill you. That was instinct. If you tried to explain that you were actually dreaming and that I killed you to save you, that was complete nonsense. No one would believe you. I can't communicate with them. I can only kill them. After going through the mission information, Gu Nan quickly determined the conditions for his victory. What were the conditions for failure? More awkwardly, the conditions for failure were also the deaths of Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. Creatures in the Mysterious Dream World could be killed using a special method, wiping out their consciousness and causing their bodies to enter a state of brain death. To put it bluntly, what entered the Mysterious Dream World was a strand of the creature's soul. Since it was a soul, there had to be a way to trace it back to the source and destroy the main body. What Gu Nan and Purple Will needed to do was find Shadow Song and Purple Lightning before they were killed by Zhuazhua's people. How difficult! Gu Nan shook his head helplessly. These conditions meant that not only was the difficulty of the mission high, but there was also an element of luck. And the element of luck meant that there was a time limit. Gu Nan and Purple Will had to make every second count and find Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. If they were unlucky, Shadow Song might have already died to Zhuazhua's hands before they even entered the Mysterious Dream World. Chapter 247. 100,000 Spirit Stones was not easy to earn. Even with Gu Nan's insane speed at completing missions, it was the equivalent of half a year's worth of hard work. Now, he had to do it all in one go. It was not going to be easy. 3 days passed. Purple Will returned to the small building and informed Gu Nan that he could leave. They were in a small plain near the dream world. It was a stepping stone to enter. The dream world was a plain that not even world breakers could enter directly. Purple Will prepared as soon as she received the news. When she contacted Gu Nan, she still needed 3 days to open the tunnel. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was to enter the dream world with one's real body. After all, one's real body could retain consciousness. That was a big advantage in the dream world. Fortunately, Zhuazhua's people were facing the same problem. Everyone was on the same starting line. Be careful of the dream world's nightmare, Purple Will warned Gu Nan before entering the dream world. I know. Gu Nan nodded. He was not arrogant enough to look down on everything. On the contrary, before every mission, he would do a detailed analysis of the mission's background. He would not miss out on important information like this. Nightmare was the only native creature in the dream world. It was a strange existence that existed between reality and illusion. The special nature of the dream world was that it was often used to kill powerful people that were hard to kill. It was also the source of dream power users. The reason these dream power users could do this was because of the existence of nightmare. The whole process was simple. Find a way to make the enemy dream. Create a god soul in the dream world, and then guide the nightmare to eat them. Those who were eaten by the nightmare would die immediately. Their god soul would be destroyed. In that case, dreaming was still a very dangerous thing. Fortunately, the nightmare would not attack the dreamer unless it was guided by a dream master. Or someone else entered. The nightmare's attack is mainly targeted at people who have distracting thoughts. Purple Will clearly knew more than Gunan. Don't worry about those two dreaming. We are in more danger. The dreamer acted on instinct, so of course there weren't many distracting thoughts. Seeing that Gunan was already prepared, Purple Will did not say anything else. Instead, she said bluntly, "Let's go. Don't split up. We need to have a greater chance of success." The lost dream world was very special. Its entire body was a space of nothingness, but its interior was divided into pieces of various sizes, some even overlapping with each other. Just figuring out the path to the dream world was enough to give many a headache. In this kind of situation, the only way to find traces of Shadow Song and his companion was to search the area one by one. There was no better way. The first space was not too big. With their speed, they finished searching in a short while. "No. I don't have one either. Let's go to the next area." Purple Will did not mind. There were at least a few hundred regions in the dreamy world. How could he be so lucky as to encounter the first one? Wait. Gunan did not move immediately. Instead, he casually struck a corner. Very quickly, a dull roar was heard, and it pounced towards Gunan and Li Wuyo. This roar, which seemed to be both real and fake at the same time, caused the purple intense expression to change in an instant. A nightmare shapeshifter. This guy, Gunan, had actually discovered the nightmare shapeshifter in this area and deliberately awakened it. Purple Will had no idea what Gunan was doing. Of course, this did not affect her actions at all. She was running for her life. In the lost dream world, nightmares were almost immortal existences. Even if they were killed, they would quickly revive, so fighting them was meaningless. Fortunately, there was only one nightmare shapeshifter in each area of the dreamy world, and nightmares could not travel through space. After the two of them quickly left the area, the nightmare shapeshifter could only roar angrily. "What the hell are you doing?" Purple Will said angrily. She did not understand what Gunan was doing. Was it fun? Of course it's to cause trouble for Zhua's people, Gunan said without any intention of being in the wrong. Purple Will was taken aback, but then she began to understand what Gunan was trying to say. Nightmares were usually in a state of deep sleep, so the two intruders had always been careful not to disturb them. Once a nightmare shapeshifter was awakened, it would not be easy to fall asleep again. Usually, it would have to feast in its own area before stopping. The principle that dream masters used to kill their enemies was actually to find a way to awaken a nightmare shapeshifter in the area that the enemy had entered, so that the nightmare shapeshifter could eat the enemy. Zhua's people, will they coincidentally be behind us? Who can say for sure? Gunan shrugged. But unless they're moving at the same pace as us, they'll definitely run into areas that we've been to before. As long as we can disrupt their movements, it'll be worth it. Gunan laughed. It's no trouble at all. Of course, Purple Will did not understand the last half of Gunan's sentence, but she understood what he meant. In any case, the two of them would not suffer any losses from awakening a nightmare shapeshifter. It was indeed no trouble at all. Shadow Song and Zhua could not travel through areas of their own accord. Those who would search for them from area to area would be Zhua's people. This was indeed a good deal. Of course, this would inevitably lead to the deaths of many innocent people, but did Gunan seem like someone who would care about such things? Purple Will understood Gunan's meaning. So, in the subsequent search, the two of them would purposely awaken the nightmare shapeshifter before they left. With their standards, they were prepared in advance, so there was not much danger until they arrived at another area. This was also a small area, But what was different from before was that it was clearly scattered with villages and houses. The dream world was supposed to be chaotic. There was only one possibility for something to appear in this area. The nightmare shapeshifter was awake. "Be careful," Purple Will said immediately, and then her figure suddenly disappeared. Gu Nan frowned as he looked at the spot where Purple Will had disappeared. This was not a method of movement that he knew of. Instead, it was as if the space itself had been moved. Has the nightmare shapeshifter been awakened? Shadow power reverberated around Gu Nan's body, and his heart was beating slightly. After such a long period of recuperation, Deity's descent had long since cooled down, but Gu Nan was not in a hurry to use it. Under Gu Nan's vigilance, the nightmare shapeshifter came. Gu Nan felt the scene in front of him change, and he found himself in a completely different place. The nightmare shapeshifter's attack extracted the deepest part of a person's heart, causing them to sink into it. If they stayed in the illusion for too long, they would naturally have to stay inside. The illusion could be their own, or it could be someone else's. The scene that Gu Nan was currently experiencing was clearly someone else's. Atop a snow-covered mountain peak, the person who appeared in front of him was someone he had never expected to see. Chapter 248. In a certain area near Gu Nan and Yi Lingchen, 3 silhouettes entered, and immediately, there was a huge commotion. Another awakened nightmare. "This is the 6th one," one of the men said angrily. They were the 3 dream masters who had been ordered by Zhuo Zhuo to find Shadow Song. Not long after they started looking for him, they encountered a series of problems. Dream world masters were a special profession. They were not very strong. There was only one break world out of the 3 of them, but they were the ones who knew the most about dreams. In a special place like the mysterious dream world, they were not afraid of the powerful break world. That was because it was their home ground. "It must have been those 2, another man said. The other man beside him said in a deep voice. His appearance was somewhat similar to that of the first man. Perhaps they were brothers. Before they left the area, they woke up the nightmare. An old voice sounded in their ears. It was the 3rd person who spoke. It was an old woman with white hair. Her face was wrinkled like a ravine, but she looked very energetic. She was a break world-class dream master called Granny Tuesday. Next to her were the Zhao brothers. They kept making a mark to calm the restless nightmare demon. Dream masters had many ways to deal with nightmares. It was much easier than laymen. It took a lot of effort to calm down the nightmare. The older brother of the Zhao brothers, Big Zhao, went to Granny Tu and said, "Granny, we can't keep doing this. Should we create some trouble for those 2? Dream masters were very powerful in the mysterious dream world. Even Big Zhao, who was just a transcendent, could discover the existence of Gu Nan and Big Zhao. Granny Tu's face was expressionless. She smiled and said, "They are already in trouble." The person standing in front of Gu Nan was red. To be more accurate, this person was not the red that Gu Nan had seen. It was the red from when she was young. Her young face and petite body showed her true age. Even the powerful Star Master rarely maintained a little girl's appearance. "Are you leaving?" Young Red coldly looked at Gu Nan and said in a low voice. Red seemed to recognize Gu Nan, but Gu Nan knew very well that Red didn't recognize him, but the original owner of this illusion. In other words, Gu Nan had replaced that person's existence. Who could it be? Shadow Song, Violet Lightning, and even Violet Will were all possibilities. Perhaps it was someone who had come to the dream realm before, and coincidentally, Red existed in their memories. An indescribable emotion welled up in Gu Nan's heart. Guilt, pity, regret. These were also the emotions of the original owner of the illusion. Gu Nan, who had understood the dreamless world, would naturally not be fooled. Dreams were very suitable for killing people invisibly, so it had been researched a lot. Methods to deal with nightmare illusions had long been summarized. At the end of the day, there was only one word: disbelief. As long as one's willpower was strong enough, one would be able to break free from the illusions in the illusion. However, memories were gradually surging up, about this place, about himself, about the girl in front of him. Red, was she really called Red since 10,000 years ago? The scene in front of Gu Nan seemed to blur for a moment, and then immediately became clear again. The next moment, Gu Nan smashed his fist forward without hesitation, hitting young Red's petite face. In this illusion, shadow power, magic breaker, equipment, and skills were all stripped away, but at least Gu Nan still had his own body, and he could still fight with his fists. Young Red didn't seem to expect Gu Nan to attack her, and to attack her at that. She stared at Gu Nan with shock and despair. The indescribable sense of guilt grew even stronger, almost making it hard for Gu Nan to breathe, as if attacking Red was a heinous crime. However, this forced sense of guilt did not affect Gu Nan's movements at all. His gaze was still cold and calm, and his fist did not tremble at all. Crack! Another punch landed, and the poor child's brow bone was instantly broken. Her entire body was sent flying by Gu Nan's punch, and she fell heavily into the snow. Her face was stained with blood, and pure white snowflakes fell on her cheeks. The mixture of white and red gave the scene a different kind of beauty. Why, Red, who had fallen to the ground, was still staring at Gu Nan. Her voice was full of confusion, but it soon stopped. That was because Gu Nan had already taken a step forward and broken her neck. Whose illusion was this, and what relationship that person had with Red, Gu Nan didn't care at all. Gu Nan wasn't a curious child, and he didn't want to become a famous detective. He just wanted to complete his mission and get paid. You killed her. A voice came from beside Gu Nan. Gu Nan turned around and saw Purple Will, and behind her was a group of people he didn't know. Their attire was different from now, but their faces were not much different. Perhaps after a certain stage, Purple Will's appearance had been fixed. Purple Will was roaring at Gu Nan, and a thought emerged in Gu Nan's mind. I'm not acting as Purple Will, so who is it? This thought only lingered for a moment, and Gu Nan's body moved again, and he punched again. The emotions became more and more intense, and Gu Nan even felt like his body was about to explode. The countless emotions reflected directly in his mind were enough to make him dizzy. But Gu Nan didn't faint, and he was as awake as ever. The fist landed firmly on Purple Will's face, and Gu Nan brought her directly into the group of people surrounding him. He then punched out mercilessly. On the other side, the three Dream Masters found Shadow Song and Red much easier than Gu Nan and the rest. The three of them didn't even need to look around. They just used a secret technique to search the entire area, and it was even more efficient than doing it themselves. Purple Will, a Star Master from the Purple Civ Sky. He's very experienced, but he hasn't found a suitable astral world. Granny too took this opportunity to tell the Zhao brothers about their opponent. Is he a Star Master? Second brother Zhao's voice was a little low. The two brothers were transcendents after all. Facing an opponent 2 realms higher than them, they still felt a little guilty. Although a Star Master without an astral world was essentially a world breaker with complete rules, he was still a Star Master. If they were to be categorized by rank, the two people facing off in the astral world were actually just Star Masters. However, their astral worlds were powerful enough for them to dominate an entire world. Granny too, of course, understood what second brother Zhao was thinking. She said, "So we definitely can't focus on this person. The other one isn't easy to deal with, right?" Big brother Zhao asked. Through the dreamy world, they already knew the identity of their enemy. The name Gu Nan was well known among Masters was subordinates. The failure of Gu Nian and Shang Rong's operation made many people feel confused and even panic. Even Master Shang Rong, one of the 5 attainments monuments, had died at his hands. Other than Master Zhuo, who else could defeat him? However, Granny too revealed a mysterious smile. Gu Nan, he has a weakness. What weakness? At this moment, the Zhao brothers' curiosity was aroused. Chapter 249. Young. Granny two's words were powerful and resonant, But the Zhao brothers were somewhat puzzled. To be so powerful at such a young age, was that not an advantage? Although many young people were impulsive, that person did not have such problems. His tactics and mind were more outstanding than many old foxes. Gu Nan does not have those problems that young people have, but he is still young, Granny Tu said in a low voice. Being young means that it is impossible for him to know what happened in the past, so he will be curious. In front of a nightmare, curiosity will cost you your life. Granny Tu was right. Purple Will had already broken free from the nightmare's attack. She had even chased it away, but the attack on Gu Nan was still ongoing. The nightmare was like a huge bubble, and its attack was very interesting. It separated a part of its body from the bubble and wrapped it around its target. The illusionary world was indeed a very special place. Gu Nan's real body was actually dragged into the nightmare's bubble like a soul. Purple Will, who had already broken free from the bubble, could see the illusion that Gu Nan was experiencing through the bubble. She could tell at a glance whose illusion it belonged to, Zwa. More accurately, it was Zwa's previous self. When Zwa was still a normal boy that winter, he experienced that unforgettable choice. Purple Will's thoughts seemed to return to that winter, when she saw Zwa defeat Red, and then resolutely embarked on a journey to find her sister. After that, they never met again, because the next time they met, Zwa had already become that monster made of a man and a woman. Oh, back then, he was not called Zwa. Even that name came later. Zwa, there was no right. Could Gu Nan bear Zwa's emotions from back then? Faced with such a dilemma, could he have a clear conscience and finally break free from the illusion? Purple Will was very worried about this until she clearly saw what Gu Nan was doing in the projection on the bubble. One punch. Another punch. Gu Nan had completely inherited Zwa's body from back then. He did not have any power of laws, nor did he have any comprehension of laws. He only had his fists. Red's neck had been broken by him, and Purple Yi's face had also been beaten black and blue. Even the dozen or so people who had arrived with Purple Yi had not been able to escape his fist. Of course, in a situation where there was no difference in strength, it was somewhat difficult for Gu Nan to fight 1 against 10. He was in a state where he was being ganged up on. In the face of Red's death, the dozen or so people were enraged. They poured their anger into their fists and punched Gu Nan. But Gu Nan didn't even bother to respond. 2 of his front teeth were knocked out, half of his ear was torn off, and his left leg was fractured by someone's kick. He even had to rely on his right leg to move. He looked extremely comical. But Gu Nan's expression didn't change at all. He just focused on beating people up. He stared at one, and after killing him, he started beating the next one. The first to fall was, of course, Purple Yi. She was Gu Nan's first target. Then the second and the third Purple Yi, who was outside the bubble, was frozen. She could not imagine what Gu Nan was doing. It was against all common sense. Being in an illusion, one couldn't just mutter, "This is all fake." Even if it was not one's own memory, the memories and emotions of the original owner would be poured into the target's body. There was no way to resist. "Granny, do you mean to let Gu Nan sink into Master Zwa's memory?" Zhao Er quickly understood what Granny Tu meant and was shocked. "No, it's sinking into one of the memories." Granny Tu smiled leisurely. "Emotions will be poured into him, and memories will flow in." Granny Tu understood the Nightmare Lord very well. The Nightmare Lord's attack is the highest level of a dream master like me. After all, the Zhao brothers were not world breakers. They didn't know much about nightmare, which was a specialty of the lost dream world. But they still nodded. If what Granny Tu said was true, then nightmare was indeed very strong. To a dream master, how to make their target sink into a dream was their main concern. Using the target's own memory could easily be seen through by the target because of the details. Using someone else's memory, however, had the problem of immersion. how to make the target feel that they were the person in the illusion and not in the illusion. The commonly accepted view was to use the agitation of emotions to make the target think. In the process of thinking, the original owner's memory would be implanted bit by bit. The whole world knows about the fight between Master and that person in Galaxy World. Who wouldn't be curious about their past? Granny too had a confident smile on her face. Unless it's someone who already knows about it. With Gu Nan's young age, he definitely doesn't know. That's his biggest weakness. Before Granny too could finish her sentence, she suddenly froze. The Zhao brothers were still nodding at the side, looking at this senior with reverence in their eyes. They were immediately shocked by this scene, thinking that Granny too had been ambushed. This was the lost dream world. It was not strange for strange things to happen here. Granny, are you okay? Big brother Zhao rushed forward and shook Granny too's body. If she was really in a dream, this method would work in the early stages. I'm fine. The silver-haired Granny too felt like her body was about to fall apart. She spoke with difficulty. The Zhao brothers heaved a sigh of relief. They were about to ask her what happened, but Granny too spoke first. Gunan is free. Granny too's voice was filled with helplessness. The Zhao brothers stared blankly for a moment and didn't know what to say. It was not a big deal to say that a dream could not trap someone. After all, this was the profession with the most variables. However, Granny too was just analyzing Gunan's weakness. In the blink of an eye, he had escaped. How awkward was that? Granny too's expression changed. Finally, she said in a low voice, "Let me see how he escaped from the illusion. It's also a preparation for the next attack." Even though it was just an excuse that Granny too came up with, it made sense. Dream Masters could directly communicate with the source of the lost dream world. That was why Granny too could use the incubus to prepare such a luxurious meal for Gunan. Now, it was not difficult for her to communicate with the lost dream world again and obtain information about Gunan's actions in the illusion. I'll switch to that person's point of view. In this memory, he should have met him first. Granny too switched to Red's point of view and tried to see Gunan's actions from start to finish. However, she could only see the beginning and not the end. Chapter 250. A nightmare's attack is not as scary as I thought it would be. Gunan quickly escaped from the illusion. He was also wondering about the power of the illusion. In the information he received, the nightmare was very dangerous. Often, break world people who entered the dream world with their real bodies died there. Purple Will looked at him strangely. She thought to herself, if you do this, then no illusion will work. Indeed, if anyone could be like Gunan and kill without saying a word, then this sort of bewildering illusion would really be useless. But why could he do it? Purple Will did not understand. How could someone be so determined to exclude Zhua's memories? Was he not curious at all? She was the top existence below the 13 skies. She could ignore the home advantage and suppress Red in the galaxy world. She was a superstar master. Gunan was familiar with the past of such a powerful person. As long as he had the slightest thought, the memories would surge out like a tidal wave. At this moment, Purple Will realized that this illusion was probably not a coincidence. Instead, it was deliberately set up by someone. It's a dream master. Purple Will told Gunan, Zhua controls Silent Destruction Sky. I cannot believe she has a dream master. Dream masters were special existences. Gunan did not know about them, but because he was going to enter the eternal dream world, he had to learn about them. People who were born with dream rule powers had to go through special training to become a dream master. It was normal for there to be very few of them. That was why Purple Will could not find help at the moment. He did not expect Zhua to have one. Silent Destruction Sky? Gunan caught another piece of information. 36 skies and 72 world. You must have heard of this, right? Yes. After getting Gunan's confirmation, Purple Will sighed. That was what they said in the past. Now there are only 29 Sky-class planes left. Zhuozhuo's Silent Destruction Sky is one of them. 36 skies and 72 worlds had become a general term. The status of a star boundary was ultimately determined by the strength of the Star Lord. Over the past 10,000 years, some heaven-grade astral realms had been removed from this list, and some world-grade astral realms had also been added. In the end, the number of astral realms had stabilized at 29. After listening to Ziyi's explanation, Gu Nan nodded silently. He realized that the identity of Zhuozhuo and Red was not what he had expected. According to the usual plot, Red was the realm lord who was in charge of a realm, while Zhuozhuo was undoubtedly the villain who was lurking in the dark, plotting to take over her foundation. But in reality, Zhuozhuo was a Star Lord of a higher level than Red. Rather than calling it a conspiracy to seize Red's foundation, it would be better to call it an invasion that was open and aboveboard. In other words, you and Zhuozhuo have always known each other, right? Gu Nan recalled how the two of them had pretended to be strangers back in the private dungeon. Of course, Purple Will said casually. It's no secret that Zhuozhuo is in Nirvana heaven. We all thought that he had already forgotten what had happened in the past, but who would have thought? The battle of the astral realm was ultimately related to the grievances of tens of thousands of years ago, but Gu Nan just waved his hand. He had no interest in the backstory of these NPCs. Continue, Gu Nan said. Purple Will thought that he wanted her to continue talking about secrets from tens of thousands of years ago, but before she could speak, Gu Nan had already dashed out. Since the Nightmare Lord had been chased away, they naturally had to continue searching. What a strange person. Purple Will shook her head and turned to run in the other direction, but she immediately stopped. In that direction there were clearly two familiar figures roaming about. Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. Found them. They found them. Granny Two's voice rang out in another area. Someone is attacking the dream spirit. It must be them. The dream spirit referred to the soul of the dreamer in the dreamland world. This was a term unique to Dream Masters. Dream Masters had the ability to communicate with the consciousness of the dreamland world, so Granny 2 was the first to notice the abnormality. Then, Granny, should we chase after them? Old Zhao carefully asked. Normally, chasing after them would not have required much thought, but this time, their opponents were a bit weird. He did not forget that when Granny 2 went to check out Gu Nan's illusion, she almost fell on her butt. Of course, Granny 2 did not immediately make a decision. After a while, she said, "Chase." This was the first time Gu Nan had fought against both Shadow Song and Purple Lightning. More accurately, he was only fighting against Purple Lightning. Shadow Song's power recovered quickly, but he was still a step away from breaking the world. In front of elites like Gu Nan and Purple Will, Shadow Song had no power to fight. But the power that Purple Lightning displayed was beyond Gu Nan's expectations. This swordsman had been sleeping for 10,000 years. When he woke up, he used a sword mind that he had nurtured for 10,000 years. He displayed a power that shocked even Gu Nan. What was surprising was that now, he was doing exactly the same. Purple Lightning stood in front of Shadow Song with his sword. As a dream spirit, he could not recognize Gu Nan or Purple Will. He only knew how to fight based on his own instincts. It did not involve any rules. It was the purest sword in the world, and it came slashing down with shocking speed. The purple sword light slashed Gu Nan's body. It left a wound so deep that bones could be seen. Blood splashed everywhere. Gu Nan paused in surprise, waiting for the heretic god's body to recover on its own. Then, he saw Violet Lightning's figure quickly pounce towards Violet Will. Purple Will's body was surrounded by dark purple lines. The light was shining. It bounced Purple Lightning's sword away, but she was also knocked back. Although she was a Star Master, she did not have an astral world. She had been injured by Zhuozhuo before, so she could not gain the upper hand against Purple Lightning. When you go crazy, you'll even kill your own mother. Tsk. Purple Will couldn't help but glare at Gu Nan. However, Gu Nan's figure had already disappeared. Gu Nan had an innate sense of the situation on the battlefield. He knew what he needed to do, and he also knew that his skill set was the most suitable for an assassin. His target, Shadow Song. Purple Lightning suddenly turned around, stabbing his sword at Shadow Song. However, he was too late. Or rather, it wasn't that he was too late. Gu Nan simply ignored his attack. Gu Nan appeared from the darkness. In pursuit of extreme speed, he didn't even use his sword. Instead, he reached out, grabbed Shadow Song's neck, and lightly twisted. The sound of bones snapping was incomparably clear. The petite Shadow Song slowly fell to the ground. Purple Lightning's sword easily stabbed into Gu Nan's chest, but Gu Nan simply grinned. Then, he suddenly disappeared, leaving Purple Lightning and Purple Will staring at each other.